Great, thank you. Hi. Hi, Scott.
Hey, good evening. Almost, yeah, good evening, Miriam. And what a beautiful image here. Is this a painting?
Yeah.
Wow, gorgeous.
Thanks.
Thank you for sending the invite. I wasn't sure whether it was the same Conservation Commission invite or a different one, so thank you for sending it.
Yeah, this will just be a part of our open meeting.
Okay,
So Patrick will be joining us, so
yes, wonderful.
I can take my painting off. One of my hobbies.
Is that your painting?
Yeah,
Oh my gosh, that's really wonderful.
thanks.
Do you have a website or something?
No, I'm like I just do it all on my own.
It looked professional.
Yeah. Well, I try to pawn them off on my family members, but they have all gotten enough paintings for me to hand down to their few descendants for a few generations. They're like, oh no, we don't need another painting for mom.
I thought it was quite impressive.
Plus, if I give them a painting, they feel obligated to put it on the wall. So
Yeah. Well, thanks for squeezing us into your schedule tonight.
oh, it's great.
We've been talking about this and thinking about this and scratching our
Good.
heads. It's a very interesting situation, and I'm hopeful that we can help.
Well, I'm sorry tonight that a couple of our commissioners can't make it, and one of them, Beth Wilson, is a wetland scientist. She used to be conservation agent for the town of Amherst, and now she works for the Amherst Water Department. And certainly she's really interested and has a lot to offer, but just can't do everything. So
Sure, understood.
We'll have her in for the next one.
Great.
And maybe if we get enough rain, we could do a site visit.
I would love to do that. You know, I grew up sort of in your neck of the woods. I grew up in a small town, Dudley, which is central Massachusetts, a little east of you, and spent most of my childhood mucking around in the woods and the wetlands. I didn't know what wetlands were at that point, but yeah, you're a little different, a little further west, but I certainly am familiar with the general terrain, and I'm fascinated with this idea of I'm not sure what we're going to call it yet, subterranean streams. And I know I've seen them in other parts of the country. I've been talking to Patrick about that, but I'm not sure I've actually spent time in Shutesbury before, so I'm looking forward to the opportunity to do that.
Well, there's some really good examples, but none of them are useful right now because.
Right. Miriam, are there any site plans that might show where where these are? Topographic maps, either.
I need to ask Scott when he joins the meeting, because Scott is on our commission, and he took a video during the winter of a site behind his property where he lives, where he was just, I don't know, hiking or something. Yeah. And I don't know the location of it, but he could probably locate it for us and give us all, you know, mark up a map or something for us. Yeah. And that would be cool.
Yeah.
And Janice she'll be joining us, and Janice has kind of hiked over every square inch. Do you know Janice Stone? Do you know her?
Sure. I don't recognize the name. I'm not sure.
So Janice is also a wetland scientist, and she used to be the chair many years ago of the Conservation Commission. She drafted the bylaw, and for some time was on the board of MACC. So, and she's works for another conservation commission as an agent. So she's but she's knows every wetland. I swear she knows practically every fern in town.
Yeah.
Hello. Hi, Mary.
I have to turn my table sideways here, too bright.
How is it out there in Shutesbury tonight? I'm in Boston and it's been quite warm all day.
Wow, it's warm here.
Is it?
Sun,
Yeah.
sun is still pretty strong, although I was just listening to the news about some big showers coming.
Let's hope.
I know. It was nice to have rain the other day, but it didn't quite get everything.
I don't
Right.
believe it. They say it, but they mock us. These predictions, they just.
I know, they they haven't been right in their predictions, but we could use the rain, so I guess if there's a big storm, although we lost power here at the other storm the other day, like, that wasn't even a big storm.
Well, we're still, here comes Janice, and we're still waiting for Scott. Hi, Janice.
I know Patrick's going to be joining us. I just talked to him a few minutes ago, but.
Good. And for folks who are just here, could you just identify yourselves for a sec for the minutes? I see there's a Jan and a George.
Yeah, hi, George Abdo.
Okay, hi. And Jan. Well, we need Scott or we won't have a quorum. We need
Yeah,
Patrick too.
he's still got a minute. Yeah, we do need to get phone numbers for reminders. Are you remembering? We're starting early.
Yeah, I texted him on Monday. I'll text him again. Meeting starts.
I lost my calendar, so I'm lost.
Okay. Let's see. Let me call Scott. Hi, Carrie. What, you had your hand raised?
What about Robin? Is she coming
Here
in?
he is. Here he is. Here he is. Yay.
Yeah, Robin's not coming.
All right. We're good. He's coming.
Hey, Miriam. Sorry I'm late.
Hi, Scott. Welcome. Last but not least, we needed, we wouldn't have had a quorum without you because Robin and Beth aren't here tonight.
Yeah.
So let's convene the meeting at 6:33. On our agenda first is to meet with Patrick Garner and Scott Horsley to talk about some of their developing thoughts about how to revise our bylaw regulations in order to provide regulations for subsurface streams, which is a resource area in the bylaw that has been hitherto undefined. So did everybody get a chance to read the draft that Patrick sent out?
Yep.
So how, Patrick and Scott, welcome. Glad you're here. And I just want to make clear for members of the public that we're not making final decisions tonight. This is a very preliminary discussion. Once we finalize draft regulatory language, we would have a public hearing on it. So that's not happening tonight. We'll have some discussion, and if there's members of the public that want to have comments, hopefully we'll have time for comments or questions. So go ahead. How would you like to start this discussion? You guys want to talk a little bit and get us up to speed with what you're thinking about?
So, Mary, let me step in on Patrick Garner. With me tonight is Scott Herbert, and the two of us have been researching basically the definition of subsurface rivers. It's trying to, if there are other committees that have regulations that covers and how they're handled. It's really safe to say that Scott cumulatively hours.
Is
I'm
anyone
fine.
else having a hard time hearing Scott? I'm
I
sorry.
am
Yes.
too. I am too. Scott, Patrick, our connection seems to be poor. I thought it was me, but it's not.
No.
So
Yeah, you're breaking it well. I hear you're sometimes coming through well, and sometimes you're not.
Patrick, if you'd like, I can try to summarize, but I don't want to jump in front of you. If you can try to correct it, I'm not sure.
Yeah, go for it, Scott. Application's better than mine now.
I'm having trouble hearing Pat also.
I don't know if Patrick, if there's other devices that are on your network that you could shut down. So maybe that's your bandwidth is unstable.
Yeah, I do an awful lot of them. I typically don't have any kind of problem, and I'm not doing anything unusual tonight. So my apologies.
You sound
Scott, Are you
better.
coming? Okay, are you coming through better than I?
Oh, you're breaking up again. Yeah, you want me to try to summarize, Pat? Okay.
Yes.
Please
All right,
do. That'd be great.
I'll step in here. And so as Pat was saying, we've had a number of conversations about this. We've both done a fair amount of reading and research and talking to peers in the industry. And while this is somewhat of a unique situation, we both feel that it is a valid situation and a resource area that deserves protection. I think some of the things that we've identified that up for discussion and we're thinking about is when a stream, let's say, disappears, which really means it infiltrates into groundwater and then reappears, there'll be a certain distance between, let's say, where it ends and starts again. And we may want to define what the maximum distance is to designate what this stream might be. And we're thinking it's probably on the order of 100, 200 feet or something in that range, because it is possible to have what we call a losing stream up in a hill and then have another stream appear let's say even thousands of feet downstream. And it's pretty hard to connect those two. So we think some distance between the two ends of it might be worth including in the definition and in the regulation. The other thing we talked about is, do we want to put something in the reg that would allow either the applicant or the town to do any testing to verify the connection? And obviously there are some techniques like using tracers to make sure that what is leaving one end of the stream and appearing in the other end is in fact the same stream. I don't know. I should have prefaced this by saying I haven't seen one of these yet. I have not been in the field. I think you all know that in Shutesbury. So I'm working off of what I've heard through Pat and through you, Miriam, and others, and as well as my understanding of this situation occurring in other areas. So that was the second item. And let's see. I think those are really the two questions we kind of have. The third item that I have on my list here is we would really like to see an example site plan where you think you've seen one of these. We were going to try, I think, as you all know, we had offered to come out there really pro bono just to spend some time and look at the lay of the land, which frankly I'd still love to do, but we all know it's too dry to do that right now. So we'll put that on reserve. But in the meantime, if any of you could identify a site plan where you think you've seen this, ideally a detailed site plan, like almost like an NOI kind of thing where you might have 1 or 2 foot contours, that might be really helpful to us in determining, is this a typical situation? What are some of the dimensions that we might consider? And maybe I'll just stop there and see if there are questions or if Patrick wants to try to add anything, but I think that's a fair summary of where we're at. And we certainly, again, support the commission's efforts here. We think this makes sense to declare this a resource area with buffer zones and provide protection. Perhaps that's the other question we did talk about is buffer zone. Do we add a buffer zone to this as a resource area, or do we use the buffer zone from the upstream and downstream, daylighted stream part of this? And that's still a question we're evaluating. So I'll stop there, Madam Chair, and see if you or others have questions.
Yeah, I have some questions, and I was just going to say Scott had showed some video of an intermittent stream that was disappearing, and I don't know, Scott, if you'd be able to locate that on a topography map. Would you be able to do that?
Yes, I would have to get a GPS back out there the next time I'm out and to get a more accurate location, but I could do that for sure.
You could also tell us whether there's any water in it.
Yeah, well, I can tell you it's dry. There's
Yeah.
no water running anywhere, even in the major brooks, there's no water running. This one, I don't know, and looking at it too, there may be different types of intermittent streams, but this one, there's a lot of loose rock in the area. And so I mean, you can definitely hear it running through rock, and it's not, I don't know if that's truly underground or not, but it appears to go underground, but it's going through these rock crevices and coming back out. So I don't know if it's a true definition or not for what you're looking for. And it's a bit of a hike to get out there too. It's probably 45-minute hike one way.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, if I may, through you to Scott, can you give us a sense, or maybe any of you, how many of these types of streams you think might occur within Shutesbury? Are we talking a few, dozens, or hundreds, or what's the general sense of how frequent this occurs, if you know?
For me, I don't think I have a great sense overall of how many there are. I think they occur. I don't think they're common. I don't see very many. This one that I happen to know of is, one of the only ones that I'm aware of. So I don't think they're common, but other members of the commission might have a better sense of that.
I guess my thought is, it depends on how we're defining it, because if you're defining it as, let's say, an intermittent stream, there are many intermittent streams where the stream appears, disappears, appears again, as sometimes as a seep, disappears, and then eventually kind of coalesces into a more well-defined stream, I would say. What do you think, Janice?
I don't know either. I mean, I can picture a couple areas from just where I would walk around. And I haven't been trying to stop to look at them when I'm hiking otherwise. And right now, everything is so dry, it's hard to tell. I don't follow the stream banks. I don't think there are many, but I really don't know. I just, sometimes you see them and sometimes you don't. And Miriam and I were talking about if there are some projects that have happened in the last year that might have plans that possible intermittent stream disappearing happened during the course of the peer review, for instance, with that sort of thing. And there might be one or two maps, I think, along that line, right, Miriam?
Yeah, and I think if we're talking about the ANRAD maps, it might be worth my asking Emily, because
Yeah.
doing some of the hearings for some of the ANRADs when this issue was raised, and Emily was consulting with us, she did say there were a couple of parcels where she thought there may be evidence of intermittent stream, or a stream that might be subsurface. And, I guess one of the questions I have is, how is this helpful and protective of resources if it's already protected? So it seems to me that, if it's an intermittent stream with, that looks like BVW, it's going to be protected. If it's isolated wetlands over 1,000 square feet, it's protected. So really, are we looking at situations where it wouldn't necessarily meet either of those criteria, but we might want to try to protect it? And what conditions?
I think we heard a lot about it when we were looking at those site visits. And some of the questions were, it may be an intermittent stream, but does it really connect with that one that's over there? Is it really gone underground to connect? And that's where the question kept coming up is, are these connected in some way? I may identify them, but how do I know if they're connected? And I think that's where we first start hearing a lot about the intermittent streams. And
Well, if there are example site plans, as you, Janice, mentioned, and maybe you as well, Mary, that would be really helpful, I think, to Pat and I. We've talked about that. If you could identify which one those are and maybe provide us a copy. Miriam, to your point, I guess I would say that this goes back to my point about the distance of separation. If it's just a few feet, it probably doesn't matter, because you're right, the BVW protection will be there. But if it's, let's just say, 100 or 200 feet, it's possible that the protection would not be there based upon BVW. We'd want to delineate the subsurface connection as a resource area.
Or if
Yes,
part of the way in which it surfaces is looking like an isolated wetland and it's under 1,000 square feet, then it wouldn't be protected.
Let me interject if I may. Am I coming through anywhere clearly?
No.
No. Okay. Under your
Patrick, do you want to try to access by phone?
or do you want to go out and re-sign in?
Yeah, maybe try and call and maybe get off my computer. Maybe that'll make it worse.
Sometimes just turning off your video can help too.
Oh yeah, try that.
I did, and it made it worse. So I'll be back.
You were fine for
Okay.
that last sentence.
Of course. Am I okay now?
Not bad. I think if you move closer, it looks like when you move forwards a little, it helps.
Is that any better?
Oh, then maybe try the other techniques.
Okay, I'm gonna call in.
Okay.
Scott, one of my questions is there any way, and maybe this might be the thing to think about also in terms of Shutesbury, sort of characterizing different or understanding sort of different geological conditions where an intermittent stream a subsurface stream might exist. And, you know, I don't know exactly what geological conditions would be most ripe for that. If it would be, for example, you know, shallow bedrock or deep till. I'm just not really sure.
Well, I wouldn't doubt that varying superficial geologic contacts between till and sand and gravel might actually have something to do with this discontinuity, where, you know, a stream comes down a hillside, which is most likely till or shallow bedrock, and then it encompasses a more permeable sand and gravel. That would be a common place, I think, where the stream could disappear because it might infiltrate more quickly and then reappear. So it's very possible this is geologically linked, as I think you're perhaps suggesting. But I think, again, until we see some case studies, and in fact, the one thing I have done is studied your topographic maps and your superficial geology maps. I was actually looking for evidence on them, and I couldn't find it. In other words, where USGS might have mapped a stream, and then it stops, and then it starts again. I could not find that. But I suspect that has to do with the scale of those maps, which is not that detailed.
No, it's not for wetlands in particular.
So
Right.
I think it would be helpful to be able to talk to the person that the Conservation Commission uses for their peer reviews, Emily Stockman, about whether she can recall examples that would be good to look at from projects that she's been reviewing.
Is she with a firm, Janice, or?
I think Patrick's with us now. Are you here,
Oh,
Patrick?
good.
Yeah, I am. How do I sound?
You sound great.
Okay, great. So you can't see me, but luckily, or maybe not luckily, you can hear me. So what I was trying to say earlier is I've been listening to some debate about whether an intermittent stream is protected, and under the Wetland Protection Act is protected only if it has upgradient BVW. But my read of your bylaw is that you are protecting streams, intermittent streams and perennial streams, whether they're surface or subsurface, period. And the bylaw doesn't have the provision that the Wetland Protection Act has, where it requires BVW upgradient. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's definitely my read of it.
I'd say we're probably silent on it, aren't we? I mean,
Okay.
we don't really say anything one way or the other. And I think
Yeah.
we're sort of still learning possible implications of the way I wrote it.
Okay. Well, I think, I think Mickey Marcus has come in and argued that, the intermittent streams that don't have BVW are not jurisdictional. And he's right under the Wetland Protection Act, but as I read your bylaw, you clearly protect all of these things, and that would, you don't say so, but that would include seeps and that sort of thing. But if I can sort of redirect it, I know we're running out of a little bit of time, and I apologize for my earlier connection.
We have some time.
Okay, well, my interpretation of the bylaw is that the stream is protected until it goes into the ground. And then because it's got a 100-foot buffer around it anyway, it's got a diameter that would be centered at the point where the stream goes into the ground and then sweep around in a circle. And then, for instance, if the stream reappeared, say 300 feet down gradient, there'd be that point where it reemerged would have a 100-foot buffer around it. And so consequently, because there's 100 feet and 100 feet, but you're 300 feet apart, you have a 100-foot unprotected gap. But I think if the stream was less than 200 feet apart, where at its inlet and its outlet, then the stream under the bylaw would be protected regardless. So that was sort of the focus that Scott and I were taking, was how far apart should this be? And I think that's going to end up having to be something, we can recommend, but the commission needs to sort of participate in helping define, because we saw some downsides. If it gets, as Scott said, if it gets too far apart, then even running dye or tracers, it becomes more difficult, because typically these streams disappear when they hit a glacial boulder field that's that's below the ground. And the channel might be 2 feet wide on the surface, but when it disappears, it might spread out over an area of 15 or 20 feet or even more, and slowly work its way downhill, and then reemerge, you know, in a confined, defined channel again. So it becomes important not to get too far away with the entry and the outlet. And then there are other downsides too. You know, for instance, I think I mentioned it in my list of potential issues, but you've got the potential of the stream disappearing on the applicant's property, but then reemerging on a downstream of butter's property. And the abutter might say, you know, you're not coming on my land. So then tracing it becomes difficult. And that becomes an issue when you need to know where the underground sort of center line of the stream is, so you can protect that. So that's, you know, that's another one of the issues that I think becomes something that needs to be kicked around. And we're not under a time pressure, as I understand it, but
Well, I think we might.
You think we are?
Yeah, I think we are.
Okay.
To
Well,
some extent. I can't tell you what that looks like, but I think we don't want to be too casual about working on this. I have a couple questions. One is, do we need definitions for defining what is an intermittent stream? So that two areas of wetland areas or isolated wetlands that, you know, currently somebody may say are not connected, are connected. So that's just a question also about whether, you know, for example, the tracing or other characteristics we need to use for definitions. And then the other question I had was thresholds. Because we've talked about, we're not going to require small single family home landowners to do intensive investigation. So, you know, how do we capture the right scale to regulate?
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think the scale, particularly as it applies to single family homes versus larger developments, is not something Scott and I have kicked around. In terms of timing,
that might not be a scientific, that may not be based on a scientific standard. It may just be what's practical, that, you know, what's financially seems reasonable.
And a lot of bylaws and regulations do exactly that. They exempt certain uses and activities, and so that's, you know, that's something you could do. In terms of isolated wetlands that may and may not be connected, the Wetland Protection Act isn't terribly helpful, but there's a lot of case law and there's a fair amount of adjudicatory decisions that define that pretty well. I've been involved in several, both small scale and large scale, and essentially what you're looking for is a hydrologic connection between the, you know, the quote unquote isolated wetland and some channel.
Mm-hmm.
And those can be very subtle. The hydrologic connection may occur for 2 days in the spring only, you know, every year. But that's all that it takes. There's no time definition. So that you know, that's something that, but you know, that's sort of chasing, I think, something that's not part of what we were tasked with.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be happy to help you on the side, sort of doing that, because I've had a fair amount of experience with that. But it's often, it often comes down.
If there's any literature or case law you want to share with me, that'd be great, and I can pass it on to people.
Okay, yeah, that would be good. But I was going to say, a lot of it is really just going out in the field, seeing it at the appropriate time, and saying, because often the hydrologic connection may be very shallow, it may be very ephemeral, and what's obvious on April 21st by August 21st may not be obvious at all. So it tends to be subtle and seasonal. You know, and so I could find a wetland and make an argument in August that it wasn't connected, and my argument might fall apart on a wet spring. But that's not the subsurface stream thing that we're chasing around here. I think that the draft definition we came up with for a subsurface stream is a pretty good effort. And I think the remaining issues, as Scott said in the very beginning, are really distance between where the stream disappears and then reemerges, and procedures to test that flow to ensure that what's coming out of the lower end of it is really part of the same stream that disappeared.
Yeah, see, Janice has her hand raised, and then Scott.
Yeah, so I had just a couple questions. First of all, talking about, and this may be slightly off, but it's related about the intermittent stream channel and what is the minimum flow necessary. With the climate change, does one torrential rainfall that has flow then in a channel or creating a channel, does that then count? I mean, I'm just wondering where that end is in terms of how infrequent a site can have flow and still be considered intermittent.
Yeah, Janice, my experience and my read of particularly the Wetland Protection Act is that there's nothing that defines that.
Okay.
It does by definition it has to be a defined channel.
Yes.
But it doesn't say that it has to be for instance, a minimum of 12 inches wide and 6 inches deep. It just has to be a physical channel in the ground. So I guess, and again, I say I guess because I haven't seen this in case law, but if you went out in 2023 and saw it flowing like a son of a gun because you'd had 3 days of rain and you went back out the same time the next year in a semi-drought and it wasn't flowing, that wouldn't mean that it wasn't an intermittent stream.
Okay.
The Wetland Protection Act doesn't say it has to flow yearly.
Okay.
Just,
So yeah. Okay.
Which is good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good from the commission's point of view because it protects a wider, range of resource area than it would otherwise.
Yeah. And then another thing I just wanted to say that when first the question was asked about how big a gap between where it goes underground and comes back up, trying to be sort of practical and use some existing distances that's in the Rivers Protection Act. I thought that 200 foot, I'll just throw that out. So that's what I thought seemed reasonable. First of all, 200 feet, basically that whole, as you were saying, the section in between is protected from 100 foot from where it goes down to 100 foot where it comes back up. And so to me, that seemed reasonable. And I can't imagine trying to trace this over thousands of feet or other sorts of conditions. So I would just throw that out as my suggestion. That's it.
Does that mean-
I would agree with you. I think that makes a lot of sense because the other thing you have to chase is the thought that if it's, say it's 200 feet apart, and the whole point of trying to protect this is so that if there's a development that wants to run a road or some subsurface utility in between the inlet and outlet points, what you're trying to do is protect that subsurface flow so that it's not impacted or disrupted. So what that means is the applicant then has to be able to define where the velocity is underground, where the sort of the center line of that stream is, so to speak. And they're going to have to do so, I think, through some deep hole testing at 25 or 50 foot intervals, because the subsurface stream could meander subsurface just like it might meander on the surface of the ground. And if you get farther and farther apart, that becomes almost crazy to try and trace. I
see. I'm trying to remember. I think Scott, you had your hand raised, and then Mary. I have a quick question, and then I see Elizabeth has her hand raised, but I've got a question after Mary. So, Scott, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I had a couple thoughts. I guess I'd preface it by saying I have a great interest in what Mass DEP is calling headwater streams, and as some of you or all of you may know, they've published a fair amount on this, and I'm one person that's not sure that the focus on the wetland regs provides most of the protection to perennial streams, but I've never really understood exactly why, and I'm in the camp of, I think the intermittent and up above the intermittent, which is really ephemeral streams, might be equally as important. So I think this effort we're talking about really may be focusing on those ephemeral or intermittent streams. I agree with Pat, there is no de minimis for intermittent streams. So I think in Massachusetts, we include ephemeral streams, which of course are defined as streams that only flow when it's raining, as potentially an intermittent stream. And I think that's good. So
Maybe
this,
lost Patrick and he came right back.
oh, okay. And the only other point I wanted to make is I would also hesitate on the single family home exemption. I can envision things that could happen with a single family home application, including a septic system or a driveway or a foundation. Could be pretty problematic to these subsurface streams. So maybe there's some relief, but if we're really talking about, protecting them, I would think, and my guess is that's probably the majority of your applications, your NOIs would be single family homes. I don't know that to be true, I'm guessing. And some of the more rural communities that I work, that seems to be the more common application or NOI that's before you. So I would just hesitate on a full exemption from single family homes. We can discuss that more later, perhaps.
Mary, go ahead. You had a question.
It was really more of a comment to include. Do we need to include when we do this, the time of year that we need to be looking at these? Like, would we accept something in August when it's totally dry, or do we need to say, we'll accept things between this period of time and this period of time when it's likely to be wet and be present?
Yeah,
Just
this is
another-
Pat again.
another thing to think
Let me comment. Miriam and I talked maybe a week or so ago by phone around some of these issues, and that was one I raised as well. You guys need to be aware, and that's a great observation, that if we're talking about intermittent or ephemeral streams, the testing for connection from one point to another could obviously only occur when these things are flowing. So it might very well, the analogy I used was that of vernal pools, where you really can only go out to certify them now in the spring, and you might have a 2 or 3 week period max, and that's your window. And it would be identical with the stream if you had to locate its centerline thread under the ground. You can only do that, particularly if you're doing dye testing or some kind of tracer, with when it's actively flowing. So that's another issue. If an applicant came in September or October and everything was dry, they would have to wait in the same way that they would if the commission said we've got to know whether this is a vernal pool before we can condition this NOI.
So one of my questions, thank you, is if we talk about attaching a 100-foot buffer zone, which is the way the bylaw is written currently, it's an intermittent stream, or if it's a BVW, we attach, or a perennial stream, we attach that buffer zone to the surface components. If we're talking about a subsurface stream, meaning that we're wanting to protect the sections under the ground as well as above the ground, would we do the same thing, sort of model a bank, an underground or hypothetical underground bank, and have a 100-foot buffer zone on each side of that?
We did talk about that. Go ahead, Pat, sorry.
No, I go for it, Scott.
Well, I was going to say, this also goes back to the initial point about how far are we talking here? Because if it's a couple 100 feet, I think it'll be pretty possible to be able to connect the dots, if you will, to look at where the stream bank is upstream and the stream bank downstream, and literally draw. I mean, one way to do is just draw straight lines connecting them. The other way is to do it topographically, follow the contours. And I think that would be reasonable. As Pat mentioned, the further we get, if it's a 500-foot separation or 1,000 feet, that gets a lot trickier.
Yeah, but that would actually, in terms of protection, be adding a layer of protection that doesn't exist now, even if those two circles sort of are touching, it's still a little different.
Yeah, and I think
Yeah.
my sense is that's, go ahead, Pat. Sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say, I agree. I agree with both Scott and what Miriam was saying. I think the added protection that we're talking about here is defining where that subsurface stream flows under the ground. Because then from the center line of that stream, once it was defined, you'd have a 100-foot buffer on either side of it. And it's conceivable that it would be unlikely on really steep slopes, but where slopes became flatter, it's conceivable that that stream could do a bit of meandering under the ground. So it might not, go in a straight line from point to point.
The buffer zone would help with that. It would provide a little more protection with the uncertainty of where the subsurface bank, if you will, actually is.
Yeah, but what I've been envisioning, or I guess worrying about from the commission's point of view, is that if one of these instances occurred and you had somebody come in and say, I want to put a utility, or I want to put a road directly in between these points, what the commission should not want to see is that flow disrupted or impacted in some ways, so that conceivably it even destroyed the downstream flow coming out that has been there for so long. So you'd want to capture the actual physical location of that subsurface feature at the point that would be disrupted, so that conceivably, a road could be permitted or a utility could be permitted, but perhaps the flow would be captured in a culvert of some kind. That would be an engineering challenge to the company doing the design. But what I would hope to see presented in this sort of a regulation would be impacting the stream, the subsurface flow itself, stopping that from occurring.
Janice, do you have your hand raised?
Yes, I find this very interesting. I don't know if other people do or not, but I do. And I'm just wondering along that line too. So it's part of that may be depth, right? Over the 200-foot distance, if it suddenly goes down deep, then some kind of a utility crossing may not be a problem. But if it's a shallow, in some cases, you can hear these things going through rocks. And like someone was saying, Mary or someone, that you're not quite sure if it's underground or not quite underground. But at any rate, so that could be a factor for those places where people are going to be digging into the earth and down a certain distance. But I would think that for a lot of cases, if they're just going to be putting a driveway across that gap, it still falls under jurisdiction. It's still in the 100-foot protected resource buffer zone under the bylaw and all, but it doesn't necessarily need the information of where that actual stream is if you're just working in sort of between the two gaps and you sort of accept almost assume sort of a straight line. 200 feet isn't that far that you get that much wiggle room. I'm just trying to figure out ways to be practical.
We need some performance standards for this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, most of these, I've seen a number of these, and most of them are fairly shallow. And and as she said, you can often hear them. I was on the DEP Technical Advisory Committee that helped define perennial versus intermittent streams some years ago, and I remember it was the first time I had ever seen one of these. We went out to a site, and it literally, the stream disappeared, and you could walk down 50, 75 feet and stand at a low point and then hear the water gurgling underneath your feet. So I don't think most of these, and usually what they do is they hit what we call, a small boulder field from past glacier activity. I don't think most of these go down very deep. I think they're characterized by fairly shallow flow. You're not going to find one down 6-8 feet, I don't think, although, never say never. But yes, performance standards should probably give a practical depth consideration. Yeah, if you're putting in a road or you're putting in a utility, that's that's typically going to happen within 5 feet of the surface. And anything deeper than that, maybe even 6, 7 feet, but anything deeper than that is not going to be impacted. So that's another consideration.
Elizabeth, you had your hand raised a little while ago. Did you want to make a comment?
No, my question was answered. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. All right. Do we have more to discuss right now? Does this feel like a good stopping point?
So maybe
Well,
at some,
Yeah, let me
point-
say, I think Scott and
Go
I
ahead.
are ready to do any refinements that, you ask us to do. It would be helpful, again, if we could get some sort of confirmatory mapping and, a little bit of guidance again about whether we're going to try and protect these at 200 feet or 300 feet or whatever you guys talk about. And probably we'd be happy to participate in a sort of informal discussion if you want to, or,
Yeah.
but we need your guidance to proceed, I think.
I mean, my thought about it is that 200 feet seems like a distance that would be more manageable and more easily verified.
Yeah, I would agree.
And then, if we could establish a center line, have it a methodology for establishing a center line, so there could be a buffer zone on each side of the subsurface parts, then there would be perhaps a real protective benefit that doesn't exist currently. Go ahead, Elizabeth, I see your hand raised. No?
You're muted, Elizabeth.
Thank you. I want to go back to Janice's question when you're finished with this part, Miriam, because my understanding from a wetlands person in Vermont is that you really need to get out there at a certain time of year. And that goes not only for intermittent streams, but also for certain species and that kind of thing. And I'm wondering if the experts have advice on timing. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the question is timing and, maybe conditions where we wouldn't do it, like maybe not when the ground is frozen, not when it's in drought periods.
well,
Go ahead.
Clearly spring, wet time of the year is the best time to go look for these. So you could bracket a period, much like Pat was talking about for vernal pools, but maybe a little bit longer. The other thought that we did talk about is if there are not, going back to one of my earlier questions, if there's just a handful of these streams, it might be helpful for the town to consider going out and mapping them in advance and getting them on a map, almost like a certified vernal pool. These would become town certified subsurface streams, and then you'd have them on a map. I don't know how feasible that is, but if there's 6 or 8 of these and you kind of know where they might be, that might be another option here. Instead of waiting for the spring, a wet spring each year, if you had them on a map where you already know where they are, that might be helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Okay.
the wet spring requirement does definitely put a burden on the applicant. And in the same way that it puts a burden on them to certify a vernal pool.
Okay. I think,
Looks like Janice.
why don't we, okay, go ahead, Janice. Yeah.
just on that, the same problem as with vernal pools is private property. So even if we go out in the spring and we maybe are starting on town land, but if we get onto private property, we can't do it without permit. So, and I'm guessing that there'd be a lot more than 6 or 8 in town.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I will reach out to Emily Stockman and see if she has any insight about what the areas that she reviewed. And sounds like Scott is going to try and at some point give us some location for the intermittent stream that you had identified, which was a good example, a good exemplar. And maybe what we'll do is put this on our agenda for our next meeting or in the next couple meetings when we have a little bit of time, and then get back to you guys about what our thoughts are. Does
That would be
sound
ideal.
reasonable?
So,
Okay.
yeah, that sounds good.
Thank you so much. It's been really interesting and I've learned a lot and I'm excited about our
Yes,
continuing this.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. It gave us
Great.
a lot,
Thank you for
it
your
gave us a
time.
lot to think about.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good
night.
night. Okay, it is 7:18 and we have on our schedule, we have a public hearing at 7:30 and then another one at 7:45 and then at 8 o'clock. And then we've got some items that we're going to handle afterwards. And I'm wondering, if we have 10 minutes, maybe we could address a couple of those right now. I wanted to get back to Mr. Mitchell about 678 Pratt Corner Road. Beth did a site visit last Monday. And then I came out and did a site visit a couple days later. I guess it was a week ago last Monday. And then I did a site visit on I think it was Thursday. Or maybe I'm getting those days mixed up. But anyway, the point being was that they've determined that they don't have enough loam. They don't have enough fill to fill the trench. They can't grade it and restore the grade without adding loam. Mickey Marcus estimated that perhaps 3 cubic yards would be enough. But then the question was what type of loam? And they had suggested a kind of sandy, rocky loam that they could get from one source. And I guess I wanted to get feedback from the commission about is that the type of soil we want to see them use, and so they can go forward. Janice, do you have some thoughts about that, about what type of soil for a restoration?
Oh, I'm not a soil person, but I would think that Mickey would probably be the on-site person who's been there and has that kind of background to be able to suggest what would work best for the
He
wetland.
said sandy loam. He said sandy loam.
Uh-huh. I mean, lacking, if we don't have anyone else with the expertise, I guess, go with his.
Okay. Okay, yeah, I mean, I just,
I would agree with that because I did look at, to me, the samples almost all look the same,
yeah, well, I mean, I was surprised. I'm not a restoration expert, but I would have thought you'd want some organics if you're trying to model it after a, hydric soil profile. But maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Is there a concern, Miriam? I guess the only thought would be if it, if we still think it's going to convey water or affect the hydrology of the site.
No, I don't think it'll, I'm not that wasn't my concern about it conveying water, just whether it would be suitable for revegetating. But, it's really wet there. So I'm very confident that even in a drought, things will want to grow there. When I was out there last week and we were already in a really significant drought period, there was still standing surface water, which is really impressive given that there's no standing surface water in any wetlands around here. So it is a very wet spot. So, okay, I will just respond to them and let them go ahead with the soil that they've chosen. That sounds fine. The other issue I guess I could talk about just briefly is that I was asked to go and join a site visit at the Dudleyville Pond over on Montague Road because there's a beaver dam that has developed, and there was a concern about whether or not it could be a safety hazard. So I went out yesterday and did a site visit with Becky Torres and Kat Hilton from the Board of Health and the two landowners, David and Lois Brown. the highway department had looked at it also because there's a culvert near that dam. The dam itself has been under inspection reviews by the Office of Dam Safety for near on 20 years because they issued an order determining that it was an unsafe dam. And the landowners have not had the resources, is my understanding, to remove the dam, which would be very, very costly. And so they've been working with DB, the Office of Dam Safety, which is not DP, it's DCR, trying to come up with a remedy and perhaps a funding source for it. So if they're going to do something about the Beaver Dam, they're going to need to get a permit from the Board of Health, and they're going to need to get a wetlands permit. But in the process of meeting with them, David Brown mentioned that he's continuing to do repair work on the dam and on the walls, the side walls of the dam. And I asked him about that, and he said he was doing it under a Concom permit, which surprised me. So Carrie and I did some investigation, and what we've determined was that in 2018, there was an RDA, but it wasn't for doing any repair work on the walls of the dam. It was for demolishing a generator box. And then there was an enforcement order also for a different issue, doing unpermitted work near the dam. So there is the other issue is that RDA permit has expired now. It's over 3 years, so it's not an active permit to allow work, and the work that he's doing is not, was not part of that permit. So this is where I'm wondering whether we need to set up a site visit with him on our own and possibly review what we want him to do. It could be an enforcement issue. It could be, sending a cease and desist letter and then requiring him to submit either an RDA or a notice of intent for continuing to work on it.
It sounds good. It might be good to ask Walter Tibbetts. Does he have some back information? Because he seems to have a lot of information he was given to us about the different dams in the area, and that he might have some information on what's been going on there too. And some ideas on how to fix some of these things. So it might be, I don't know if he could actually go out on the site visit, but he might be able to tell you what to look for and some thoughts.
Janice, you have your hand raised.
I think that's a good idea what Mary had. Also, is the work that he's doing trying to stabilize or keep that location stable? Since it's sort of like he removed part of the dam and there's parts still there, and it used to generate electricity a long time. So is it a repair or restore or maintain sort of thing?
Well, I think it's a repair. That he's worried that the rocks are not going to be stable.
Because I would worry about that. I mean, it's a fairly focused point for the water coming down to there. And if you don't want a collapse of what's left of the dam or the wall there. But,
no,
I'm not a dam safety person, so I don't know.
No, you don't. And, so it could be a good thing that he's doing it. But even if it's a good thing, he's still supposed to be doing it under an order. Right?
Yes, I'm just wondering if he has any paperwork from the dam safety office about what he should be doing on that site.
Yeah, I mean, I have that. We have the paperwork. There's an order, and then there's the annual inspections, which we have, the inspection reports, and I can forward those to all. If I didn't do it already, I can forward them to you. You can take a look at them. But yeah, the Office of Dam Safety had all sorts of things they wanted him doing. I'm not sure that this is what they wanted done.
I think there was stuff that if he was going to keep the dam, there was a lot of work he was going to have to do.
Yes.
And so that's why he sort of opened it, at least partially, but I don't know, where is the Beaver Dam? Is it behind that other dam there?
Right, it's right behind the
Ah.
earthen dam. It's
Oh,
like,
okay.
it's right up on basically the toes of the dam.
Okay. I mean, that's what I would worry about is I wouldn't want to see a sudden collapse one way or the other, whether it's to remove the Beaver Dam or from lack of stability or whatever of the old dam to suddenly have that rushing, because that would wash out that narrow part of the road right there.
Yeah, I mean,
It'd be a
they,
mess.
Becky and Kat did not feel it was, and I guess Tim Hunting have not felt that there's an imminent danger. But
Okay.
of the dam itself giving way, because it's pretty solid, but there's a sidewall that's not reinforced. And the beaver have kind of built up a kind of dam just outside of that, and there's water leaking in, and you could get a catastrophic failure on this sidewall, and it's not reinforced, and that would probably be the spot that would go if any were going to go. But again, the issues around the Beaver Dam have to come from the Board of Health, that they're the ones that have to be the drivers of a permit. And then we would be responding with either an emergency certification or, requiring an RDA. But the work on the face of the dam and the front, the downstream side, was not really in the purview of the Board of Health or the Beaver Dam. So it's sort of a different issue. And as far as I can see, there was a outstanding enforcement order that was never dismissed. So there's that too. I will send those orders to everybody. Should we set up a site visit with the owners and?
Sounds like a good idea.
Okay. I will do that, and then we'll go from there. Okay, it is now.
So can I just make a comment to
Yeah.
Mark? I see Mark Rivers is on the phone about the, we did it when we were doing our site visit on Cove Road the other day. The owner showed us trees that the beavers were cutting down and taking into the cove. And I haven't heard anybody else remarking on where they might be building a new dam. So I don't know, that just a heads up. I don't know if you've heard anything too.
Mark, I have not heard anything.
Okay.
All right, well, it's 7:30, so let's open the RDA public meeting for 17 Cove Road. Stephen Avanti is the landowner, and is Stephen here?
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Stephen. Welcome. So would you take 5 minutes briefly and just kind of review with the commission what you're planning on doing?
Sure. So currently there's an old dilapidated rundown shed that's 20 by 16. It's in severe disrepair. We'd like to remove that building, put a couple of inches of gravel for drainage and for air, and build a smaller 12 by 16 shed in that same spot. It's under 200 square feet, so it does not need a foundation or piers or anything like that. So there's no ground disturbance. So we put the gravel down, and then we would put blocks every 6 feet or something like that. So it's resting on blocks. And then there's a bunch of debris from the previous tenants that have been there in the surrounding wood area. We want to just clean up and get rid of the trash and debris that's around. So that's basically a project.
Okay.
And there's a dead tree on the other side of the yard too.
Okay. And in terms of resource areas, it is within the 100-foot buffer of the bank of the lake, but also there's a bordering vegetated wetland on one side of the property.
Correct.
And it's within the buffer zone for that as well. Anybody have any more questions about it? I thought it was pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't catch for erosion controls that you're looking to put into place while you're doing the work? Is that something that you've talked about? And I'm sorry if I missed it.
So the site visit, we talked about using silt stocks on the downside between the construction and the water.
Okay, thank you.
The socks as opposed to a silt fence.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it looks pretty straightforward to me, so.
Okay. Well, I have a draft. So if people feel that we're ready to deliberate, and all the questions answered, we can take a motion to close the public meeting.
So I'll make a motion to close the public hearing for 17 Cove Road.
And is there a second?
That's the second.
Okay, David,
Aye.
Defont, I, Con.
Aye.
Okay, how about if I screen share? I'll screen share the docs, and we can get through this. Here's the RDA form. People see it?
Yep.
So site plan. I'm gonna minimize my screen, so if somebody's got their hand raised, someone let me know, please. Oh, there's a little typo, an R, it doesn't belong there. Okay, so my thought about this is that this would be a negative determination number 3. Now, Janice, what we've been doing is checking off this box 5 because it just to say that it's under the bylaw as well. Is that okay? Even
I
though
think so. I think it tells DEP as
Okay.
well as the applicant that, yeah, it is,
Okay.
it does fall under the bylaw.
Okay, good. All right, and then I just have checked off with special conditions and then the signatures for the 3 of us, assuming I have everybody's permission to sign. Oh, and it would have to take Robin out of there. So hold on, Robin's not here tonight. And while I'm at it, I'll get rid of that R that doesn't belong there. So why don't we look at the special conditions before we vote to approve? So let me grab those and have that open. Again, this is all pretty standard stuff. Issued under the bylaw and the act. Proposes to demolish and reconstruct a shed and remove a dead pine. Work conforming to the site plan. Is in the 100-foot buffer zone of the bank of the lake and a BVW. And we find no negative impact. And then the special conditions, this is all kind of standard stuff. Can't think, erosion controls, socks or straw wattles, no hay. Remove debris, which he's planning on doing. Pre-existing vegetation preserved to a maximum amount possible. Any piles of unconsolidated materials like gravel or whatever would be tarped during the excavation and construction. And then any reseeding that would need to happen would be with a conservation mix, grass seed that the applicant would give us information for. Any comments or revisions?
Oh,
Looks
No?
good.
Okay, somebody want to make a motion to approve negative determination number 3 with the special conditions?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I
Yes,
second it.
Okay. And David,
Aye.
Font, I, Con. Okay, so Stephen, we will mail you out a copy and email you a copy, and this will go to your home address in West Springfield. Is that correct?
I appreciate it.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you. And if you have any questions after you get the emailed copy, reach out and let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. So we have another public hearing at 7:45. So we have to wait on that one. Can't open it quite yet. Let's see if there's anything else on the agenda that we can. The minutes, Carrie got the minutes to me a couple days ago, but I haven't had a chance to look at them, so I didn't distribute them. So we're going to hold off on the minutes and try to catch up at our next meeting. And what else do we have? Just checking follow-ups. I emailed everybody the information about the Eversource right-of-way project in case anybody wanted to look at the comments that FERCog issued during the MIPA review process. So right now, the MIPA office, which is the Massachusetts Environmental Policy Act office, is doing a review of this project, and people, the public and other interested parties can issue, send in public comments. And apparently they opened it for comment with a very short time period for public comment. And I went to a Zoom call that was being hosted by Senator Joe Comerford's office, where there were Eversource officials and FERCog and some other public officials from different towns. I was the only person from Shutesbury there, I think.
I was there.
Who was there?
I was there.
Mary was there too. So they're extending the period. So it's still open for public comment because the comment period was too short. And then at some later point this fall, they would be applying for notices of intent. And there's been some concerns about the way that this whole project is kind of being compartmentalized in different segments rather than it being one kind of continuous whole project, holistically looking at it, as opposed to looking at it in these different segments and having them being permitted separately. Janice, do you have a comment?
Yeah, I didn't get to Comerford's meeting. I would like to, but I did read the FERCog's first draft of comments, and I haven't just read the extended one, but I thought they were really well done and that they could be very helpful to the commission in terms of what sort of information the towns need in order to adequately review and permit the project. So if people haven't read those comments, they should.
Yeah. I was thinking it would be helpful to kind of know how other commissions also have approached conditioning these notices of intent for these projects. That would be helpful information. So I know that
some of the other requested documents should be coming too, right? Some different people ask for more information to be sent, so that should be coming too, right?
Yeah. But they've already done the permitting for the eastern part of the state, which means there's been a whole slew of notices of intent and orders of conditions that have already been issued. And it would be really interesting to look at some of those. I don't know if I can figure out, I might try to figure out where where some of those communities are and see if I can track down their orders of conditions just to get a sense about, having kind of a consistent approach with other communities that are looking at how to do this.
Good idea.
Okay, so there's that. And I'm trying to think what other items that I have on the agenda for tonight for follow-up. There was another site. Oh, here's another issue. We did a site visit on Sunday at 674 Wendell Road. This was a building permit application that came through. The landowner wants to put a garage workshop on top of an already existing foundation. And in looking at it and talking with him, what we discovered was that it was a foundation that was permitted about 15 or 16 years ago by the Conservation Commission. And it was originally designed to be a garage and a house. He never built the house. And what he did this year was he connected the two foundations with new foundation walls. And the project is on the outer edges of riverfront area. So now he wants to build the structure on top of this foundation that he built. So I guess we need to make a decision how we want to handle this. It isn't technically, it was a violation because he was doing work without a permit in the riverfront area that involved ground disturbance. He, it was a dug foundation. It's already done. How do we want to handle it? We can issue an enforcement order. We could tell him that he needs to submit an RDA for the project, which allows us to ensure that erosion controls are in place as he's building the structure.
I would like to see something, he had all the right answers for where he was going to put things and everything, but I would like to see something formal so that we could put in the questions that we had about erosion controls. Because it does have the potential of having some problems in that riverfront area.
Well, are you saying you'd like to see the site plan? Because there is a site plan.
Yeah, no, I think maybe not the RDA that he needs to do.
Okay. Okay. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I had those same thoughts. I think an RDA describing the totality of the project, not just what's been done today, but the full scope of what is intended, including any, additional vegetation clearing down in the riverfront area for view shed.
Yeah, he wouldn't be, it's already, most of the riverfront area on the property is forested. And there's a large kind of meadow surrounding this structure that is mowed. So, and the riverfront area line goes right through the building. So half the building is riverfront area, the other half is not. So it's on the outer edge of the 200 feet.
I see. So
but there is a slope. It all slopes down to the river. So
and that's, I guess, what I'm saying, Miriam, is I'm somewhat familiar with the site, and I think whatever is planned there, I think just having it spelled out in black and white so it's clear what is going to be done and what we're permitting and where it's going to be, rather than, having it completed little bit by little bit and then having, the work having taken place and not having any of it subject to review or to the bylaw.
yeah. Okay. So RDA, Janice, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I would just say the same thing. Just because he's already done with it doesn't mean that he shouldn't go through the same permitting fun as everybody else.
I just saw that he just signed in, so maybe we can
good.
just do this quickly for him before we open the hearing for Leverett Road. Hi, Huckle. Can you hear us yet?
This is
Hi,
when
Huckle. Huckle, can you hear us? You can unmute yourself if you can.
Sorry, just signing in.
Hi, welcome.
Thanks.
So you came in at a good time because we were just starting to talk about your project before we moved on to another piece. And the way the discussion was going is the concern is that, there was work done without a permit from us for those extensions of the foundation, which you mentioned. And I think the commission is leaning in the direction of wanting you to submit an RDA for the remainder of the work that you're planning and include the foundation work in that, even though it's done.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Okay.
I mean, there's no work to be done from this point forward, but sure. So will the RDA?
Well, you're building a structure on top of it, right?
Right, but there's nothing that would impact the ground. It's all framing up. Sorry for the delay.
That's okay. Well, I guess the point would have been if you hadn't done those foundation pieces, then it would have clearly involved ground disturbance and would have required an RDA. And I don't think we want to issue an enforcement order. I don't think that's where we want to go. That's not our interest. If we can resolve it through a permit, that would be our preference. So, you know, sometimes if somebody does work without a permit, one resolution is to ask them to go back and submit an RDA so that we can permit it, even though it's already been done. I know that
Okay.
seems kind of backwards, but you know, the alternative is an enforcement order, which
Sure.
again, we prefer not to do. And I would imagine you'd prefer that too. So
Okay. Great,
Okay.
I will start that work.
okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Does that cover
All
everything
right.
you need from me?
That's really all we got.
Okay,
So
great.
thank you
I'll
again.
get that paperwork right out.
Okay, great.
Thanks. Have a
All
good night,
right.
you guys.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now we can move on and open the public meeting for 29 January Hills Road. No, I'm sorry, I'm reading the wrong thing. Leverett Road, January 29 Leverett Road. Excuse me. We did look at 29 January Hills Road over the weekend. That's why I'm reading the wrong thing. So this is for a new garage construction, and who's here to talk about it?
David Haynes. How do I raise a hand?
You don't have to. If you want to go ahead, you're working on behalf of the applicant, and I see that Jeremy Egloff is here. Would you like to take a few minutes and just kind of give us an overview of the project?
Be happy to. Again, David Haynes, working for the Egloffs, who are the applicant. This is a request for determination to construct a barn workshop area of 40 by 22 in the buffer zone to a bordering vegetated wetland. The wetland was delineated previously, probably in 2015, by Alec McLeod, and is shown on, was surveyed onto a plan by Randy Iser. I worked off of that plan to create a sketch plan and presented that to the commission. I reviewed the delineation and I found it to be accurate. I have submitted data forms to document that the wetland area is the wetland area and the upland area is the upland area. It looks like it's a man-made ditch through there that discharges down to a culvert underneath North Leverett Road. The proposed work is all within an existing lawn area. It's approximately 30 feet from the delineated wetland. It will be a slab on grade with no footings and so minimal regrading. It's just a slight knoll in there that they'll level out. All excess material will be placed either on the other side of the garage barn area or definitely within the silt fence. Silt fence is proposed that runs up along the edge of the driveway and then around and back of the proposed barn garage workshop area. No vegetation or maybe a few shrubs will have to be cut, but basically no vegetation. As I said before, the area is all existing lawn with a cedar tree, an apple tree, a magnolia in there. It's a raised area in back of the house. The slab will be put in, the barn will be built, the silt fence will stay up until the work is complete and then removed after any disturbed soil is loamed and seeded. And that's basically, it's a very simple application. Again, 30 feet off the edge of the wetland. The barn will be 22 by 40 feet in size and at grade on a slab. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Scott, do you have any questions?
That was very thoroughly laid out. I have no questions at all. Thank you, David.
I
You're
have no
welcome. Thank you.
questions. Plus, I was on the site visit, so it makes sense to me.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Janice, did you have any comments or questions?
Sorry, no.
All right, so I think we can move along and close the public meeting. Would somebody like to make a motion to close the public meeting?
I'll make a motion to close the public meeting for 29 Leopard Road RDA.
Second,
I'll second.
okay, David,
Aye.
Font, I, Con.
Aye.
Okay, so again, my thought is a negative determination number 3. Let me pull up some draft special conditions. Can you see them?
Yep.
Okay, applicant proposes to build a garage on slab foundation. Proposed work will occur within the 100-foot buffer zone of a bordering vegetated wetland on the wetland, yes, on the property previously delineated by Alec McLeod and reconfirmed by David Haynes. Boundaries of the resource area and the 100-foot buffer zone are identified on site plan, but were not staked at the time of the site visit. Proposed foundation would be approximately 30 feet from the boundary of the BBW, and the limit of work would be less than 30 feet. So in terms of special conditions, all these are boilerplate. I put down straw erosion socks or wattles, but they're actually proposing silt fences. So
Whatever the commission prefers. I like the silt fence because it's more of a visual barrier.
okay. Shall be, why don't we say shall be installed per the application. We'll just say that because you'll so no hay used, and we'll have you submit photographs to the commission in lieu of a pre-construction site visit. Erosion controls will define the limit of work, no major changes to grade, minimal vegetation removal. And then question I had was grass. We've required conservation mix in the 100-foot buffer of the lake, but we have not on other properties. So what do you think, commissioners?
I think it needs to be in there. And they're willing to do it, so I think put it in.
Okay. All right. And that's it.
Okay.
So.
Excuse me, but
any other comment?
I had
ahead.
David Haynes, I have one comment, and that's the site, I noticed the site plan, the sketch plan that I put together was dated 8/17, and you've got 8/18, just to eliminate any confusion in the future.
Submitted by, you're saying it's 8/17? Okay,
Yes,
okay,
it was at the end of the second section there. Oh, it is 8/17.
She just
I
changed
just
it.
changed.
Oh, okay. I'm not going nuts.
Okay, good. Okay,
Okay.
so somebody want to make a motion to issue a negative determination number 3 with special conditions as drafted?
So I'll make a motion for a negative number 3 with special conditions for 29 Leverett Road.
Okay.
As drafted.
Second, I'll second. David,
Aye.
Con, I, Con.
You're
Debbie,
muted.
yes. You're muted.
Aye.
And I didn't ask with the other permit, so I'll ask for both of them. Do I have the commission's approval to sign digitally for you
Yes.
for the 2 permits we just approved? Okay, great. All right, well, thank you. Thank you, David, and thank you to Jeremy, and we will get this sent out to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. See you,
Thank you.
Janice.
All right, so we have a hearing at 8 o'clock. the other site visit, which is why I was getting all tongue-tied with the 29s, was at 29 January Hills Road. Mary and Robin and I went out and met with some representatives from the Round Hills Road Homeowners Association, and we walked around the road. Obviously, we're looking at a 35-year-old plan and a road that's 35 years old. So impossible to line those two things up really accurately. But we don't have the certificate of compliance request submitted yet. I'm inclined to approve it without requiring an as-built plan. I think that that's unnecessary and would be
I agree.
overly burdensome.
I agree.
You agree too, Scott? Okay, so
Yep.
we'll vote on that once they give us the application, but we don't need to go back and do another site visit. And Janice we can waive that requirement, can't we?
Think so. Yeah, in the end, it comes down to the Concom, and the DEP doesn't get involved.
They don't, yeah, they
No.
don't care, right? Yeah, okay, well, that sounds good. All right, so any other details we need to cover for a couple minutes before, I guess, are there any public comments from any members of the public before we start this? I would not entertain comments about 66 Lake Drive, but if there are any other comments from anybody else? No, okay. So our next meeting is going to be on September 8th. And we're going to, part of that meeting will be a joint meeting with the select board that they wanted to have a discussion with us. I'm told that the wetland delineation for lot 032 will be available by the 1st of September. So the question will be, do we want to set up a site visit the first week in September before we have that meeting on the 8th so that we can go and look at the delineations? I think that would be a good thing to do. So I'll try to reach out to people. Janice, you have your hand raised.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I stopped on, I don't know if it was Monday, Saturday, Sunday, someday in the last week, because I saw pink flags out there. And so it does look like the wetland was flagged. And what's interesting is it comes one corner of the foundation that's marked, the footprint that's marked is close to pink flags. And in another case in the back, the pink flag is on one of the stakes for the footprint. Just unless things change, I thought that was interesting on that. And I forgot the other thing. That's all, I guess.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll go take a look at it. I don't think they have a final footprint plan. I think that's just a kind of a hypothetical.
Oh,
but,
okay, good.
Okay, let's open the public hearing for 66 Lake Drive. This is a notice of intent brought by Robert Douglas to do work on his home that includes removing a drain or disconnecting a drain pipe that goes underground on his property and restoring an area of buffer zone near the lake that's been degraded because of erosion. And he's also asking the commission for approval to expand a parking area and add a retaining wall for that parking area, as well as some stone steps on the east side of his home, where right now there's a timber retaining wall. And he's asking for to put in steps instead. So Bob, welcome.
Thank you very much, Miriam, for that introduction. And can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great.
And just, I'm going to give you an opportunity to kind of introduce things and to present your application, but I want to just give for members of the public who may not have been following our meetings, the kind of history of how we as a commission right now got to this point with this permit was that in 2021, and I think earlier than that, Bob had filed some complaints with the commission about the stormwater damage on his property. we began to look at this, and in the spring of 2022, we did a site visit in early April, and then looked at it again with members of the LWAC committee, as well as LWA, and Bob Douglas and some other members of the public came for that site visit. And then we issued a letter to Bob, because what we had determined was that the drain pipe that was installed maybe circa 2014 or 2013, when the new septic system was installed, had never been permitted by the Conservation Commission. It was not part of the approved design. And this was done before Bob was in control of the property. So this was not a decision he made, but it has remained since then. So it's basically an unpermitted pipe. We asked Bob, because it was work done without a permit, to bring a proposal back to us. We felt that while technically it could have been an enforcement issue, when an applicant is wanting to work with us and is reaching out proactively, we want to try to find a way forward with that applicant rather than going to an enforcement order, if it's at all possible. So Bob submitted an RDA to us, and we reviewed this at our last meeting and determined that we did not feel this was an RDA type project, that it really needed a notice of intent. So he withdrew the RDA and resubmitted this as a notice of intent. And that's where we are right now.
Great, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And what I'll do is I'll read through the narrative of the notice of intent, and then cover any questions you might have afterwards. And you covered a lot of what I wanted to give as far as the background is concerned. I wanted to say that the most of the project, the deactivation of the pipe, will take place outside of the 100-foot mark of the jurisdiction. Parking space will be about 90 feet away from the resource area. The resource area being the lake, and the edge of the lake being the cement block wall that is alongside my property. There's a set of steps along the side. They're wooden steps that will require minimal disturbance, and the permanent stabilization, the scour, will certainly be an environmental plus down near closer to the water. So no work will take place in the actual resource area itself, which is a land under water body or lake. The proposed work will take place in the state's Wetland Protection Act 100-foot buffer to resource area, and also within the 100-foot jurisdiction of Shutesbury General Wetland Bylaw. Kind of covered how we got here. This is again, a project that took place without really my knowledge. I do remember seeing a plan that showed the culvert on it, and I asked one of my neighbors, you remembered seeing it too, but that plan does not exist in my records, nor could we find it anywhere in town hall. So I'm not quite sure what its genesis was. I had heard that maybe somebody from the Board of Health wanted it. I can't find any record of that. It might have just been a decision made by the contractor, and we just don't know. So anyway, this is how I'd like to deal with it. So right now, after receiving a letter from the Concom, it's my desire to work cooperatively with the Concom to dismantle this plastic pipe where it enters Lake Drive and sever it using hand tools or small excavator, and then block it from further discharge. The removal of this hydrological connection from the roadway to the lake will improve the water quality and protect the interests of the town bylaw and the Wetlands Protection Act. And again, the work will be taking place 130 feet away from the resource area. I also would like to put in on this part, to complete unrelated project, I seek to extend a parking space on Lake Drive 1 car length toward the house. This new space will serve as a place for boat trailer or additional vehicle to be parked when needed. The project will need some fill to be brought in and a lock block retaining wall installed near the home to assist in making the grade. The closest area of this proposed parking area is about 90 feet away from the resource area. Sedimentation control will be placed between the new parking spot and the resource area. The surface of the parking area will be crushed stone, pervious, and a hard paved edge close to the roadway.
Can you say what you mean by hard paved? What do you mean by that?
Right. So the generally, oftentimes the lip of driveways are a little bit more vulnerable because of people turning and stuff like that. This would have a paved strip right along the roadway.
Made out of
And then,
what material?
paving, hard pack, macadam tar, yeah. I
The
guess pavement,
asphalt type? of
asphalt,
material?
yeah, that's sorry, that's what I'm looking for, asphalt. Additionally, I'd like to put a set of stairs along the east side of the home. It's just difficult getting down a landscape area that we've got there. I'd like to remove a small hemlock tree along the water's edge. The area that the stormwaters come down through my yard is create a scour and a trench, and I'd like to restore that with hand tools. And the trenches would be filled with clean loam, seeded and restored with vegetated cover. The stabilization is clearly an environmental plus in keeping with Wetlands Protection Act and the bylaw. Lastly, I'm looking to put in a protective planter parallel with the roadway, the west side of the frontage on Lake Drive to protect the leach field. This is the area currently protected from cars by a couple boulders as well as the existing drain. And the leach field is a portion of the existing septic system where the water has been treated to near drinking water quality. And the leach field is what is currently placed in what had been a parking area on the edge of the road. This planter will be entirely outside of the 100-foot buffer zone of the bylaw and the on the Protection Act. And it's a nice sunny area because of the open roadway.
How long, what are the dimensions you're thinking of for that?
Yeah, I would stretch it right from the driveway to the property edge. That planter. And so how did we get here? You know, I'm only in control of this one particular piece of property that I have along the lake. What has happened is the dirty water that's getting to the lake does not generate from my home. I just wanted to briefly cover with you some of the thoughts I have on that. And these are areas outside of my jurisdiction, but I think it's important for the commission to hear about them as you saw them on the site visits. Well, when I first moved to Lake Wyola, it was mostly in the 70s and 80s, there was mostly seasonal homes with a sloping right down to the water's edge. There were parking spaces, but things have radically changed since then. Each of the homes along that strip of Lake Drive has put up large berms along their edge and actually into the roadway. And that's created essentially a giant gully where water is funneled down through. Reading through an old stormwater report on Lake Wyola, they recommend that the roads be crowned, and that would restore it to what it was before, where water would cant off the road and down across a grassed area to the road and clean it up. That's good for the health and longevity of the road as well. One thing that I sent, a technical document I sent with you along with my notice of intent was a technical bulletin about cross and slope. Flowing water that's allowed to concentrate on the roadway, such as wheel tracks, causes damage, material loss from erosion. The purpose of surface drainage is to cause the water to leave the road in a thin, non-erosive sheet flow and pattern to choose to suit the terrain and traffic. Now, in the case of Great Pines, in the case of Oak Knoll and Lake Drive, in recent years, the roads are not crowned. They're actually graded lower than the property edges in the area where they're not held in white berms. This is the exact opposite of best management practices. The best management practices, what I mentioned before. Surface water is being deliberately captured in the gully-like roadway where it increases in volume, it increases in speed, and increases in turbidity and sediment. This unquestionably undermines the integrity of the roadway, and when collected and discharged in a single area, which is what's happening at 66 Lake Drive, this causes damage and pollution. Material for filling potholes is washed into the lake, only to be replaced by new sand the following year, and the cycle repeats itself. The roads are washed out and the lake fills up with sediment. So this bottling up, where the elimination of all the other natural outlets has caused this problem. One homeowner said to me that he erected the berm so the water could get to the drain quicker, meaning that he was intentionally diverting the runoff from his property so it traversed the length of Lake Drive until it hit the property at 66 Lake Drive. Also, as I showed you on our site visit, the Oak Knoll has been raised up as well, and water directed downhill directly to my house. So this is important for the commission. The commission, this is clearly in the commission's jurisdiction. Lake Waialua was named a Great Pond in the Wetlands Protection Act. It's one of the few clean lakes that does not have a pollution restriction on types of fish that can be eaten. It's listed by Natural Heritage as an area of habitat for state protected species. And it has a protected status, priority habitat PH 1589. And this is important to the commission because this, one thing you can see in our area is the area of the pond that receives the water directly from Lake Drive has been greatly affected by high levels of this dirty runoff. The deposition of material has added sediment to the bottom of the pond in such quantity, it's formed a sandbar that you can see. The bottom of the lake has been impacted and changed and is no longer a constant drop off, but a sheer sediment shelf. It has been observed during the wintertime, this area is the last to freeze because the concentration of salt in the sediment has originated from the roadway. Deposition of material is not healthy for the lake. The stormwater sediment can have high levels of pollutants from fertilizers, automotive chemicals, oil and grease, toxic metals, etc. And the sheer amount of storm-driven sediment is dangerous as well. The blanketing effect of the dirt smothers macroinvertebrates, which are the base of the food chain. These are all things that are covered by your bylaw: water supply, groundwater, surface water, flood control, sediment control, stormwater damage, pollution, water pollution, damage to fisheries, runoff, wildlife habitat. These are all things that are clearly under the commission's jurisdiction. Now, it's got to be noticed that this water and sediment causing this damage is not from my property. It's not from 66 Lake Drive. It originates from the roadway. The water polluting the lake does not arrive at that property naturally, as I described, because of the berming of the lakeside properties. Just a couple more things. There's no easement allowing the owner of the roads or any other entity to utilize the property of 66 Lake Drive for its drainage purposes. By removing the connection of the pipe at 66 Lake Drive, we're seeking to protect the lake from this damaging runoff. And again, I don't control the roads. The only work that I can apply for with this commission is that which is owned by me. So that's why I'm looking to decommission the drain and stop the polluted water from the lake from entering my property. And one last thing, I promise. There's a application for a grant out there, and it cites this in it that stormwater and erosion of nearby roads are this direct source of phosphorus loading, and the lake has a phosphorus impairment that's listed by the state. And one of the goals of this grant, should it be funded, would be accomplished through the installation of structural best management practices to capture runoff and reduce the loading, And one last thing, this is why I think it's important. Once on a site walk with the LWA chairman, he said there was a piece of land uphill from my site that would be utilized for water treatment at a future date. Lastly, I had an interesting offer to me from what sounded like an offer to me of a Vortex stormwater scepter installed across the street from me that would handle the water. And clearly it's these best management practices, something on a large scale, on a road scale, not on a single homeowner scale, that really needs to take place to fix this problem. And thank you for listening. I appreciate it.
Thank you. What I'd like to do is pull up your site plan, and maybe we could ask you some questions about it. Bob, would that be okay?
Certainly.
Let me see if I can pull it up. It's sideways. I'm afraid to rotate it. Can people see this?
Certainly, and if I may, the lake is the blue line on the right. The Lake Drive is the yellow line on the left. You can see. Oh, sorry. This is. Yeah, there's something. The planter is missing from this plan. Do you have another?
I was trying to find. You may have sent me a revised one, and I don't see it.
I can simply describe for you where it is if you like.
Well, it's right here. It's right here in this section.
Right. So that would you can see where the existing drain is by the brackets. I think right where you've got your cursor would be the position of the planter, which would protect that leach field that you see, which are represented by the two tubes to the right.
And Bob, you're wanting to raise the grade of your proposed parking area above the grade of Lake Drive, is that correct?
Yes, That's
How
correct.
much are you wanting to raise it?
I'm not quite sure. 4 inches perhaps. I'm not sure.
And the thinking would be that water would shed this way?
Yeah,
Off of the driveway?
I've been, been asked to stop pollution from entering the lake through my property, and I believe by closing off the pipe and the front of my yard would be the most effective way to do that. And again, the lake is owned by an owned entity, actually an environmental organization, Lake Oil Association, and it's their responsibility for the road. I don't have an easement across my property to allow them to continue discharge across my property.
Also, where you're talking about the restoration area, could you talk a little bit about what you're planning on doing for planting there?
Yeah, so very simply, that would be kind of the green triangle down closer to the waterfront on the right of the screen. Yeah, that's it. So simply the force of the water that comes down, and many of you have seen the video, is so great that it's caused a scour. Simply, I would put sedimentation control along the waterfront, which is the blue line, and fill each of those areas with a clean loam and seed and revegetate it. So certainly it's in any ecological interest to not have exposed soil there, and I would simply return that to a managed area.
Okay. Do other people have some questions? I mean, I have more questions, but Scott, do you want me to leave it this? Scott and Mary, do you have some more comments or questions?
I don't.
I've been there and I don't have any additional questions.
Yeah, I've gone on several of the site visits too, so I've looked at it.
Okay. I have some thoughts about it. One is there has been a request that was made by a member of the public or by Lake Wyola Association asking us to require you to get an engineered design. And I've been thinking about that. We have it within our authority to waive the requirement for requiring an applicant to provide an engineered design. And in this case, your property is not subject to the stormwater standards. You're clearly, attempting to restore a degraded site and improve it. And much of the work that you're proposing is protective of the interests that we're charged with protecting through our regulatory work. You have given us an engineered site plan from the septic design, which shows the grades. And not much has changed. And as far as I'm aware, nothing has changed in the configuration of your property from when that engineered study was designed. So really the question is, what would be gained from our making a requirement that you hire a civil engineer to do stormwater calculations? My own feeling about it is that to really do justice to that, because we can see that there's stormwater in the past historically that is collected onto your property that came not just from your local area on the road, but was storm flow that was concentrating from other areas up gradient, that you wouldn't be able to model this very effectively without doing a whole watershed analysis. And I think that needs to happen, but I'm not sure that's reasonable to expect an individual landowner who's attempting to repair their property and restore it to undertake that kind of effort. And I think without that, I'm not sure we would get much that would be meaningful. So I'm kind of inclining in the direction of not suggesting that we require that of you. and maybe that's one of the issues that, we could discuss as a commission, and we could hear from the other commissioners. I think, you have the right to request a permit for your property. And right now, our jurisdiction is kind of focused narrowly on the application that's before us. We don't have the right to just put somebody's application aside or delay it or deny it unless we have a preponderance of credible evidence from competent sources demonstrating that doing so is going to be the most protective of the interests that we're protecting, that we're charged with protecting. So that's the model, and a preponderance of evidence is really 51%. It's a fairly low bar of certainty. It's not a high degree of certainty. So in other kinds of regulatory situations, regulatory bodies have to meet a much higher standard of certainty before they make decisions. We have a relatively low bar that's defined by the Act and by our bylaw. I also kind of want to make sure that, everybody understands that I don't think anybody on the commission, I think I can speak for the commission, really wants to point the finger or blame people. I don't think that's constructive. I don't think that's where our heart is at, what we want to do. I know there's a lot of concern about changes that have been made to stormwater runoff patterns. On our site visits, we did see evidence of incremental changes, perhaps, maybe unintentional changes, maybe intentional changes. It's hard to know, to the grade of properties as they abut some of the roads that we looked at in that area. Some of it may have been been just due to the erosion effects on the lake drive that kind of may have gullied and created a kind of a berm-like effect. And there may have been cases where some people have added landscaping that's raised the grade. We're not in a position to determine who's done what, because we don't have something to compare pre-existing conditions with current conditions. And I don't think it's going to be the most constructive for us to even try to do that. So that's not our intention. I do have a concern about if we disconnect the drain, we allow you to disconnect the drain, and the Lake Wyola Association does not decide to remove the grate. And because right now there's kind of a semi-basin with a grate, and there's a brick retaining wall or a cofferdam around it that's off of your property. So we cannot give you permission to remove that, because it's, the landowner for where those structures are is not before us for a permit. But I am concerned about that. I guess, it would be great if we do permit this to get some sense from the Lake Wyola Association about whether they would then, remove the extra part of the drain and fill in that area or not. So there's some thoughts I have, and I guess that I think we should have some discussion with the commissioners about what decision points we want to make here. I see some folks have their hands raised, and I'm happy to give the public and other people, abutters, a chance to talk. I'm just want to kind of hear from the commissioners first, and then I'll give you a chance to talk. So hang on.
Well, I don't have any questions for the applicant. I do have thoughts that probably fall under deliberation here. So do you want to entertain those now, Miriam, or?
Well, I think one of the questions is whether we wish to waive the requirement for an engineer stamped site plan.
Yeah, I guess my thought on that, I agree with what you said, but I'll expand to say I do think, certainly, there's a broader issue here with stormwater runoff. I would say throughout, much of the state here, certainly within the town, and I think climate change is going to further exacerbate that. So I think we're going to continue to deal with more frequent storms and higher rainfall amounts, all at once, and how we deal with the stormwater that comes. And, but I agree, I don't think that this is, the issue before us is removing a drain. So it's, I think it's pretty clear that that is more protective of the wetlands. It's going to lessen the impact to Lake Wyola. And I don't have further concerns, and I don't think an engineering drawing is going to shed any light on that as far as our jurisdiction is concerned. But I do think the broader question regarding where an engineering plan could really help with the whole stormwater management plan for that part of the lake, to make sure that stormwater is being dealt with appropriately and then safeguarded, in terms of how it's discharged ultimately into the lake or any other area. I think, that's a broader question. That's really where it should be dealt with, in my opinion. So it's a long way of saying I agree. I don't think requiring that of the applicant is where we need to go.
Okay.
I agree too. I don't think that's, I think the stormwater runoff is a broader issue that really involves more people. The owners of the road, the owners of the culvert, and they may already have a plan. I don't know what's the plan for looking at it. It's not a plan for the individual homeowner to be able to resolve that issue.
I think it's worth just noting, that we're trying to look at each site and each project on its own terms and merits, and that, each site has its own challenges and is unique in some ways. So, we may not treat all properties the same. And, factors that we might look at are, what are the slopes on those properties? What is the degree of changes in pervious versus impervious surfaces? What degree of degradation is being addressed? What's the size of the lot? And how much space is there to work with? Because on this lot, my observation is that it's a fairly small parcel compared to some other other properties along Lake Drive. He's got a small side yard clearances. He doesn't have a lot of space to work with and make modifications. So let's make a motion. I'm going to make a motion that we waive the requirement for an engineer stamped site plan. Do I have a second for that?
A second.
And DeFont, aye. David?
Aye.
Han?
Aye.
Okay. All right. Let's get some, we can have some more discussion, but I know that there's folks from the public waiting with their hands raised. So I know Jan had her hand raised first. Could you just identify who you are for the minutes, please, Jan?
Do you want to take the plan down?
I can take the plan down. And also I want to remind people, we have a policy we've issued in the past of asking members of the public in public hearings to limit their comments to no more than 2 minutes. And to try to give as many people an opportunity to talk as they want before we give people second chances. So you just keep that in mind. Go ahead, Jan.
My name is Jan Rowan. I'm at 55 Lake Drive, just down the street. I've been here for about 25 years, and I've watched the water flow on the river. Yeah, sometimes it is. I've watched it flow towards Bob Douglas's Airbnb, and I've watched it flow under his house. When they did the rebuild, they had a swale on the one side where the drain is, and the drain made sense to try to keep that swale from washing out. So I don't think it's a good idea to block off that drainage. It seems that Bob thinks his property shouldn't take any drainage, but all of our property does somewhere. And you've required it of the 2 rebuilds just down the street in the past 2 years. 32 Lake Drive had to put in a rock drain and they did a nice job. Hopefully it will work when it rains. You made Mike Stotz put in retention ponds. He had a little more space. So I don't understand how you can conclude that this case is different and should not take any drainage, because what you're doing is pushing all that water back into the road, which is going to destroy that segment of the road. And I don't appreciate that you made your decision about an engineering plan prior to taking comments. That's inappropriate.
Mark, I think you had your hand raised.
Yes, thank you, Mary. My name is Mark Rivers. I'm at 70 Lake Drive. I'm on a butter. Bob's house sits 66 Lake Drive, sits at a low point in the road. No matter what is done upstream, uphill, no matter how much water is diverted, there's always going to be water from the local area flowing down to that point. There's no way around it. And by blocking off the pipe, by historically there was a stream there, a stream bed, rocky bed that took the water, and then the drain was put in to take the water. But if you dam up that spot, you're just going to create a safety hazard. The road is going to be flooded. And in summertime, that's going to destroy the road. And in the wintertime, it's going to be an ice skating rink. Like I said, historically, there was for at least the last 60 years, water has always flowed through the lowest point in the street. And I don't know how that can be limited, regardless of engineering design. So I'm recommending that drain not be clogged up or dammed up, and that instead be enhanced and fixed so that it can handle the water appropriately. But
Mark, what would you think would be an enhancement?
Well, I think a properly designed, I'm not sure what it's called, a culvert or channel to handle the water is the way to go. It's because it's going to get there one way or another. And damming is not the solution. And I'm not a civil engineer. I couldn't begin to tell you how to design, a mechanism to manage that water. I know a lot of things have already been upstream, uphill, in terms of water management, pushing water towards the beach, for example. So that very little water from Great Pine Drive currently comes down the street. So many things have been done already, but you're not going to eliminate all that water. You have to have a way at the low point to get to the water. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Evan, then Tracy, and then Frank, I think. Go ahead, Evan.
Evan Jones, immediate neighbor at 64 Lake Drive. The term restoration has been brought up here. And if this pipe that was put in 2013 without a permit is going to be restored to what was there before, that would entail putting back the gully, the rock-lined gully that took the water in the first place for the last 60 years. So if this is granted to remove the pipe or block the pipe up, the proper restoration, the previous conditions would be to rebuild that gully and allow the low point on the road that is not changeable. That house is the low point on the road, always will be, always has been, and it needs to take some of the water. Thank you.
And I think Tracy next.
Hi, thank you, Miriam. So I just wanted to read something from the grant application that LWAC has put forward. I can't remember the name of the organization. Bob will know. And I've copied this directly from there. And this is references the berming on Lake Drive. And I'm not sure who wrote this grant application. I heard that it was a civil engineer in that neighborhood. It says, proposed project, install curbs or berms along the edges of the roads to direct the road runoff into constructed sediment basins, which can be periodically cleaned out. That's the proposed project. And then it states that that's partially completed. And it says that some berms have been installed on Lake Drive that have caused runoff to be a problem down the hill, when down the hill is at Bob's house, as there is no provision to deal with the runoff. All right, and then it says the Conservation Commission is currently discouraging berms. So basically it says that the berms have been installed, but that there was no plan for dealing with the runoff from the berming. And it looks like LWAC is looking to do something about that. So it seems to me, and this is, I think, an application for an engineering study, although I'm not 100% sure about that. But to me, what this statement says is that there is responsibility being taken for the fact that the berming was done without a plan for what the effect would be at Bob's property, and stating that there has been a problem created by that berming. And so to go back to the swale that was there before, which my understanding is that there was. I did a lot of research on this. I'm the one who produced that slideshow. I have a more extensive slideshow if anybody would like to see it. But from speaking with neighbors and with Bob, my understanding was that when the neighbor to Bob built their home, the swale was moved. And then at that point, that's when Bob had the septic put in, and I guess, well, not Bob, his dad, and a pipe was put in. At that point, there was only probably one bermed property next door, but then everybody else did it up going towards the beach. Because this had been put in. And as Bob stated earlier, he was told by one of those neighbors that they bermed their property to direct the water to what they were calling the drain. And so, yes, something does have to be done. The water will be an issue, but right now, because of what has been done since the time of that swale, that 60-year-old swale, the velocity and the amount of water has drastically increased, causing huge amounts of sediment going into the lake, and in the process, causing great damage to the back of Bob's house.
Thank you.
That's all.
I just want to make a comment, and I want to give more people more chances to talk, but I just want to make it clear to people that we have no authority. Or if we do, it's a very indirect authority to require any changes to berms that people have put up that are outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. And it certainly is a possibility that landowners could voluntarily remove berms or lower the grade along their property to accept some sheet flow or some storm water onto their properties. And people can do that voluntarily. Lake Whale Association could make changes to the grade of the road. That's certainly within their purview, but we can't go around kind of ordering people who don't have applications before us and who are outside of our jurisdictional zone. We can't go around ordering people to change their landscaping. I don't believe we have the jurisdiction for that. So I just want to be clear about that. Just like we can't order the Lake Whale Association to change that grade. If Bob gets this permit and disconnects it, that's their property. They can do with it as they see fit until it becomes something that falls into our neck of the woods. And if it created a problem that led to a discharge into a jurisdictional zone, then we would have jurisdiction around it. But until that happens, we don't have jurisdiction. I'm
And just to
sorry.
clarify, that's not what I was asking for. I was just stating that it looks like LWAC is looking to remedy this problem already in a grant application. So
Yeah.
we need to
Okay.
wait for that. Okay.
I understand that. No, I just, a point of clarification I just wanted to make. Go ahead, George, you're next.
Hi, how you doing? George Abdow, Lake Wyola Association Board Director. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. As far as the Lake Wyola Association, depending on what your decision would be, the board would have to meet and decide what we were going to do. I mean, I know one person would be able to answer that. I do have limited funds. We are a volunteer organization, and all of our money is collected voluntarily through the dues, which Mr. Douglas is not a member of our association. And my only fear in this whole process is that an engineering plan was submitted to build a septic system. It was approved. Don't know how the process happened. Don't know if it got closed out. Don't know if a site visit determined that, hey, a culvert was here and now it's gone. A plastic pipe was put in place of a stone culvert system. So basically a plastic pipe going downhill is going to accelerate a water process and create a fire hose effect, as opposed to water going down a rocky stream and slowing down as it goes. And a lot of this condition was created by what was installed by that homeowner or the previous owner, Mr. Douglas's, whoever was in the family. But I mean, what I'm seeing as a process here is that, okay, let's reduce the culvert and eliminate the culvert, and then let's put in a pipe. And then after the pipe, then we're going to ask for the pipe to be removed. And now there's no way for any of this water, which a lot of it is natural. I don't know which percentage is natural and which percentage is added. It's not really a debatable thing that you guys want to get involved with. But now all of a sudden we go from a stony culvert to a plastic pipe to nothing. From what I'm hearing, what the proposal is, and I just think that's going to create a situation where if the water gets high enough, Mr. Douglas's property could wash out. I mean, I don't know what it's going to create or how it's going to create it, but and who's to know what would it be like if that culvert was still there that got eliminated. But I mean, I sort of see this as maybe a way to circumvent the whole process and just go from eliminating a culvert to having nothing, and it's a little scary.
My understanding, and I Bob can respond
Was
to
the
this.
previous permit closed out and approved and gone through with the walk-in process?
It was a determination of applicability, and there was no condition requiring that that the Conservation Commission do a site visit. You don't get a certificate of compliance with a determination of applicability. It wasn't a notice of intent. So the inspection would have been up to the Board of Health and the health agent. So that's that piece. And my understanding is that that culvert, for better or for worse, the thinking of whoever installed it, we don't know what their thinking was, but they were part of the issue here. That is now the reality is that Bob has a innovative alternative septic system, which is a much more sensitive kind of septic system that has to be protected from excess stormwater. And there's, I believe, was it a bottomless recirculating sand filter that is on the side of the house? And so an open culvert near the bottomless sand filter would be possibly a problem for the functioning of the septic system. Similarly, he's got a sensitive leach field design as well. So this is a complicated site, and it has some conditions that are different from other sites because of the nature of the septic system. Frank, I think you had your hand raised.
Yes. Frank McGinn, South Laurel Drive on the other side of the lake. My only question is to the Conservation Commission. If you deny Bob Douglas's removal of that pipe, are you giving the Lake Wyola Association a quasi easement to dump water onto his property? In other words, it comes from the Lake Wyola Association's road. And yes, it is at the bottom. All the other neighbors have built their properties up, so they don't take any more water. All the neighbors, some with permits, some without permits. Are you, if you deny Bob removal of this pipe, are you giving him are you giving the Lake Wyola Association a quasi easement to dump water on his property? That's my question.
Okay, I don't know that we can answer that, but thank you for your comment. Evan, were you the next person? You had your hands raised.
Thank you. I agree as to the sensitivity of his septic system, which is, by the way, 48 feet from my well. So I am very concerned about it working properly. But again, the property is the low point in the road. So if there isn't a place for the water to go purposely down this previous trench that was there, it's going to find its way down. No matter how high he raises his driveway, no matter how big of a dam he builds, his house is the low point in the road, and it will flood, and it will probably affect his septic system a lot more than an open trench on the very edge of his property. So the neighboring properties do take water when it is flowing down the road. Mark Rivers at the far edge of his property and Trabolski's property, you can see the wash down his grass. And my property on the edge of my other neighbor's property does take water down when it rains. And Bob Douglas just is the low point, so he gets the bulk of it. That's where it ends, and there's no changing that. So I'm very concerned if he dams up his frontage that it's gonna breach and wash out his septic system and really mess up my well. Thank you.
Bob, I'd like to ask him a couple questions. If we could just pause the comments for a minute, would that be okay? And I want to make sure commissioners are asking some questions too, but if we were to permit the disconnection of the drain and having you do the restoration work and the steps, and we were to ask you not to berm the driveway or to pitch the driveway so that there would be some way to convey stormwater, perhaps to the side of your yard, rather than, toward your house or toward your septic system. Could that be a viable alternative?
Yeah, I certainly considered it, but really, it's funny. Like I said, back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, every property sloped down, and then large berms were constructed, which keep things in the roadway. There's no law requiring stormwater to go into the roadway. There's no, and everybody's house on the lakeside was the lowest part in the road until they put up the berm. So, everybody was able to put up a protective berm. It was able to keep the water off of their property. So I'm simply doing what the neighbors have done. Again, I'm perfectly willing to work with the association if they want to put in the Vortec or some other technology in order to make it work. But there's nothing that requires people or even allows people to discharge all their water into the roadway. And it's definitely, they don't have a permit to cross my property with it. So, my thought is that if I did open up a trench there, I can tell you it would be stormwater that would be coming in filled with toxins, sediment, et cetera, and be discharged right into the lake. It would be back where we were before. So
Right.
that's my opinion. And honestly, the commission asked me to find a way to stop my property from conveying to the water. And this was my reply.
Yeah. I guess one argument, and I'm just going to play devil's advocate here, is, and I'm not suggesting this, I'm just, again, trying to think it through the issues. The pipe doesn't do much to dissipate energy in the way that an open channel does. And so, the concern is that the water is accelerating and it's not getting slowed down, and then it's not getting really treated when sunlight's down behind your house toward the lake. And I imagine you considered, putting in perhaps a bioretention basin down at the bottom before the bank of the lake, perhaps.
Yeah, it really, I would consider that a taking of my property. Again, it's not my water. It doesn't originate from my property. I'm just one teeny little house among many other houses which have streets both above and to the left and right of me. And that, honestly, it's the water treatment has to be done at a neighborhood scale. It shouldn't all be directed to one particular spot and then have that person responsible for it.
Okay. And what about the idea of, would you consider, or would it be viable to you to consider redesigning your plan for your driveway? I'm not saying don't do the planter. I understand why you want to protect your septic system, but perhaps having your driveway graded in a way that would allow some water to shed off to the west, I guess it is. Is it the west? I don't, the other side of your house, what is it east, west? I don't know how it's aligned. Or is that the north?
West, yeah.
Which is it, the other side of your house?
Yeah, I again, my wish would be for this neighborhood-sized project to be dealt with by the owners that are causing the runoff, which is the roadway. So, and again, I would be interested in working with the association. There are a couple statements made to me, and I would be happy to follow up with them and work cooperatively with them.
Okay. Mark, and then I think Tracy.
Yeah, I just want to set the record straight about this concept of berming and that the neighbors are not taking their share of water. It's absolutely a false statement, and it's been perpetuated by people who don't even live here and aren't here when the water is flowing. A substantial amount of water is sheet flowed by several neighbors around here, and so that's a false statement and has to be stricken from the record. It's just not true. Driveways are bermed, and Bob's driveway is bermed. That's a standard practice for driveways to berm it up for a little bit. But I take a substantial amount of water, and I know Evan does too. And I know Skip Javolsky does too. And I can show you the water flows.
Yeah, I'd just like to say there are videos and photographs that I included with my submittal. You can see the roadway is 2 long tracks that are filled with water during any rainstorm. They bypass the houses to the left and to the right, and they come down and they discharge at Lake Drive. It's something anybody can see. Anybody who's lived on that roadway, anybody who's visited that roadway during a rainstorm knows that that's true. And as I said in my report and in my statement today, that is the worst type of best management or management practice, I should say, because it maximizes the amount of speed, length, and sediment collection. So again, it's a roadway issue. It's not going to be solved by one single homeowner. And again, I'm happy to work with any proposal that comes in. But right now, I need to comply with what the commission has asked me to do, which is to stop dirty water going from the roadway into the lake.
Tracy?
Yes, it's a little dark in here. So I just wanted to say that, in regards to what Bob is talking about in terms of a neighborhood-wide provision, the thing that myself and my partner at the time, chairs of the roads committee back in 2019, were looking at was the 2007 stormwater study, which has, for lack of a better term, a very large catch basin at the corner of Lake Drive and Great Pines to mitigate the stormwater runoff coming down Great Pines and and Lake Drive, but primarily Great Pines.
Where
And
was the where was the catch basin supposed to be? Or
right in the road, literally in the road. So,
at the,
you know,
at
if
the
you,
corner of Great Pines and Lake Road?
yes, yep. And there's a schematic, there's designs drawn in there by Scott Campbell that can give a better idea visual if you want to look at that. In addition, I just want to reiterate that in the grant proposal that LWAC has put forward, they say some berms have been installed on Lake Drive that have caused runoff to be a problem down the hill, as there is no provision to deal with the runoff. Literally, that was put in to this grant proposal by LWAC. So I'm a little confused as to Mark's point about berms not being an issue. So I just wanted to read it. You might want to take a look at that grant proposal, Mark.
Okay.
Yeah, comment.
I was, hang on, I want to just make sure we try to keep the tone respectful. This is a very challenging discussion for everybody, I understand, and I appreciate everybody's patience and being really honest about their concerns. So, but want to keep things professional and respectful. Go ahead, George. And I think it was George next. Mark, I think we already covered you, right?
Yeah, I think you did. I can't. Miriam, on that plan that when you had the plan, there was another page that was, I think, the septic page. Does that have any topographical elevations or anything, so we can see the elevations? Because the basic overall blueprint with the highlight markers on it really isn't giving anybody any sort of an idea where the angles are and what's going on and where the proposed water is going to go once this thing is eliminated.
I will try to share it. It's a big sheet, and when I zoom in, Adobe doesn't behave very well. Can you see this? The showing?
It really doesn't have the topical elevations on it. So
it does. I just have to zoom in a tremendous amount. There are the grades on it. It's just hard to see. There are elevation marks. So let's see if I can get to it. I believe that there are elevations on here. Yeah, there
okay,
are.
so the right side of the property, which would be considered the south side, is lower on that according to those elevations. Is that what I'm saying?
Bob, can you? I can't see the print very well on my screen. So,
can you repeat the question, please?
So on the property, the south side, which would be, for people that don't know where the south is, towards the rivers, is the lower part of towards the middle of the house, or which way is the water? If this thing is blocked up, which way is the water going to flow naturally?
It's a fairly flat grade there. Just trying to take a look at what's on the map there. Yeah, I really couldn't say which area is low. It's fairly flat from side to side, as I recall. It's only 40 feet or so.
Okay.
It looks like the total change up here, it says 96 feet elevation, and then I'm trying to see what the lower elevation is down by the lake. You can see it.
I'm sorry, George, was your question kind of left to right on this?
Well, my question is, if that's blocked up as water flows to the low point, where is the water going to go?
Yeah, I really couldn't say. I think it's fairly flat there. I don't know.
Do we have a good photograph of your property? I'm thinking is in your notice of intent. Do you have a photo? I could go digging through the site.
Yeah, I think they're after the narratives will come up on the photos. That's the okay.
This is the runoff. It's a photograph of your property. I can, I'll stop sharing and see if I can pull up one of the site visit forms that I know there were some photographs that we took. Because it is helpful to kind of see a picture of it. So give me 1 sec to go to your folder. Site visits would have been I hear somebody's cat.
It's actually a squeaky door.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah.
Okay, so this was the August. Let me see if there are any pictures. I did not attach pictures. There was also the site visit that we did in April. Let me see if I can figure that one out, where those pictures went. So if the commission were to say, Bob, that we did not want to see berming, you know, what would be your sense about how you'd want to treat that?
Yeah, honestly, we'd be right back in the same situation. If the commission is seeking to prevent pollution and toxins from going into the lake, then they would, because as you've seen in the video and the photographs I sent, that the water just is constrained in a giant trough, and it all discharges at my house. So that that water then would still, with its contamination and sediment, would still get into the lake.
Well, but what if it was, you know, if you were to keep your driveway, but pitch your driveway so it's draining, you know, sort of raising it a little bit and pitching to the west or the north, whichever side, that side of your left side of your house, how would, so that it, you know, bypasses your house?
I do have a stone on that side of the house. That is something that I would have to look at, but I fear that the end result would be the same. The contamination the commission has asked me to remove. I'm fearful that then it would just be another way that the water is getting in there. You know, all the phosphates, et cetera, from the road. I really think.
But it could be, it could be a more of a sheet flow as opposed to a concentrated flow, which is what it is right now. I mean, it's highly concentrated right now.
Yeah,
and you'd be diverting some of the water away from, you know, I'm saying if you kept your plan of a planter, so you're removing or, you know, guarding your septic system, so to speak.
Yeah, you know, I work with stormwater as part of my job, and you know, you've seen from the videos, and you've seen that it is kind of a you know, the quantities are massive because of this established trough. So I don't know if that would help to try and cant it off the side. Again, this is just one single house. It's about 130 foot lot by 40 feet or so, and there just isn't really any room to do stormwater treatment. It's really you know, a single family home. It's not a detention basin or you know, rain garden or anything like that.
I know you don't have a lot of space. I understand. Tom, you have your hand raised. Do you want to comment?
Hi, thanks. Am I audible?
Yes.
Thank you. I just wanted to add to the questions, I guess, about neighbor versus the road and make 2 points, please. I hope they're not redundant, but from what I've heard, it's not clear technically how the drain ever got in. And I thought it would be best maybe if people just refrained from stating whether it was a relative of Bob's or a contractor or whoever, because there is just no record of it. So it feels a little moot to belabor that. And people seem to be using that as some of their causation arguments for what to do now. The fact of the matter is the drain is in the road, which is owned by Lake Wyola Association. And there's no evidence that the LWA did not itself even know about the drain being put in when it was put in. So it almost seems best just to leave that point away. And the other thing I wanted to add was that the berming, instead of maybe calling it the neighbor's berming, if you note by walking down the road, at least what I thought I've seen is that all of the berming is actually on the road. it's over the property line from people's property lines and within the bounds of the road itself. So perhaps it should be emphasized more that it's really the roadway that's causing this and the berming that's in the roadway. Whether or not neighbors put those berms up, the owner of the roadway, the Lake Wyola Association, would seem to bear some responsibility for knowledge about those berms now, if not also then when they were put in. And I thought that might ameliorate a little bit the talk about neighbors and neighbors doing this or neighbors doing that. And one might think analogously to public roadways. And what would we do if there were a public road? We would go to the owner, which would be the town. In this case, the road is owned by the LWA. And I just thought it would be helpful to remember that and not get caught up in neighbor versus neighbor discussions. Thank you. That's all I really wanted to add.
You can lower your hand, Tom. Tracy?
Yeah, just to back up what Tom was saying, I just also wanted to make the point for any of you on the on this meeting that don't realize that the Lake Wyola Association is not a homeowners association. It is a 501c3 nonprofit. It's never been a homeowners association. It used to file as a fraternal order before it filed to become a 501c3 public charity. And they own the roads. Membership, living at Lake Wyola does not require membership. The Lake Wyola Association has opted to open membership up only to residents that live on the lake roads, in addition to some roads where people have an easement to come and use the beaches. But it is not a homeowners association, and there's no requirement to be a member unless you know, just like any 501c3, if you believe in their mission and you want to contribute because you would like to see them be able to be successful in their projects, you would contribute. And if you don't, then you don't. So I just wanted to make that point.
Okay. Janice, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I've been listening to all this and I read through the stuff and I haven't done a site visit. I've seen other areas down there and I think it's a very difficult situation. I don't know. I'm leaving it in your hands. I don't know what's best here.
Yeah. I guess, you know, there are a few things I'm thinking about.
I think we have one more hand raised.
Yeah, Bob Blanchett, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to ask the commission members who have made the site visit, sounds like several times, if you approve Bob Douglas's proposal, where is the water that's currently going through the pipe going to go? Because that is the low point. There will be a lot of water. I've heard people asking questions about grading the driveway, et cetera, but if you approve what he's asking, where is all this water going to end up going? Thank you.
Well, I think we don't know. We don't have all of the answers to that. What I have heard is that there have been improvements made on drainage on Great Pines Road and Great Pines Drive and Lake Drive that are improving the situation above the conditions that existed when some of the photographs that we've been shown. I mean, I believe some of the, I don't know the dates of all of the photographs. I know some of them were taken in 2018 before some of these improvements were initiated. So, you know, we're looking at a moving target. Things are different from how they were a year ago. They're different from how they were 2 years ago. Next year, they'll be different. So it's hard to compare the photographs unless they were very recent, I think. So that's, I think, an unanswered question. How much will there be in the future? And I don't know that we have an answer for that, or we can get an answer for that, but in a reasonable amount of time for this applicant.
Do we have a copy of the association's plan for the roads and plan as the future goes for or improvements that they're gonna make to help with the flow of water and that.
I don't know that we have a copy, or if there is a document like that that exists. I don't know. They wouldn't be required to give it to us unless they wanted to. So I guess there's a couple, for me, it seems to me that the drain is a problem. The lower part of the property really needs to be repaired. Maybe we don't want to use the word restored, but repaired so that it is functioning as a buffer zone for the resource area. It's not functioning as a properly vegetated buffer zone. So we want to see that area restored to protect the values that we're and the interests of that we're tasked with protecting. And what is unclear to me is a couple of things. One is, I guess, I'd like to see a more detailed planting plan for the area down below. And it strikes me that given the low spot that this is, and that there could be water coming down there in the future, that this would be an area where we have, with some other properties, asked applicants to develop planting plans and then required a vegetated buffer strip of indigenous plants to be maintained to protect that area. And it seems like that area, that triangle of restoration that Bob has might be the right area to propose for that. But I guess I would like to see that. And I guess that would require Bob coming back to us with a planting plan and more details with that in mind, with that feedback. And then the other question is about the berming and the berming of the driveway and how stormwater gets diverted. I guess I feel like there needs to be some way for Bob to protect. It's only reasonable to ask to allow a landowner to protect their assets to make their home livable. And we wouldn't require anybody else to sacrifice their septic system or the home that they live in or the home that they use as a vacation home or rent out. It doesn't matter. It's their home. It's their property, and we wouldn't ask them to sacrifice that. That's not reasonable. So we have to look for what are economically feasible ways to protect the interests of the bylaw and the act that also are reasonable for the applicant, and that's the balancing act. So I do have questions about berming the driveway, whether all of the driveway has to be bermed or whether there might be a happy medium, something that allows some stormwater to enter onto the property, but protects the house and the septic system. And I'm not suggesting that Bob have an easement or that he, take all of the stormwater from all of the watershed, but I'm wondering if there is some middle ground there to consider.
So I'll raise my question again, is that we've heard a lot about what the expectations of Bob is. I'd like to know what the expectations of the association are to help mitigate this plan. They're part of the diversion of the water, however, whoever did it, and the roads belong to them. Do they have a plan to help assist in where this water should or could be going? And I think that they have a responsibility to provide us some information on where they plan to go from their aspect to help work on this issue.
Well, I agree that it would be really helpful to get input from LWA with an alternative or what they would do in response if we do allow him to remove the drain. Because you know, it's really feels problematic to me for that, that pit and that grate to remain there. Because it's just gonna be an invitation for, I think, more damage to the road. So, but I don't know if we can compel them to do that. I don't know that we have the jurisdiction to require them to come back to us with a response. That's not clear to me. Yes, Scott.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, maybe a procedural point of order. Are we looking to close and deliberate on this, or are we still asking questions, clarifying the request? I'm not sure where we're at.
I guess I'm thinking there's more information I would like. So I'm kind of wanting to continue to get some feedback from Bob to answer some of these questions. Janice, you've got your hand raised.
Hey, George has his hand up to
Okay,
respond.
George,
Yeah, I
go
think
ahead.
he was first.
Hello. As far as the association goes, I mean, any decision we would make would be going to the board, and I'd be reporting back to the board what happened today. And I mean, obviously, since back in 2017, 2018, when Tracy was involved in it, right through till now, it's been a serious issue with us, and we've done numerous things along the way to help improve the situation, including taking most of the water from the Great Pines area and diverting that into a designed retention area above our West Beach, and a lot of different things that we have done. And so a lot of those pictures that were shown were done before a lot of those improvements. And I mean, the only thing that is really hard this year is we haven't had much rain. So I mean, lots of times the plan is designed from where the water is going, and then we come up with a plan in our budget to mitigate it accordingly. So we don't have a formal plan from now until the end of the year. Usually over the winter, we formulate a plan and implement it in the spring. I mean, we're a small association, as Tracy and I said before, it's volunteer. Some people choose to pay for the association, other people don't. I mean, we operate 100% with the exception of the contractors we hire to do work. Everybody else is a volunteer. And our objective is, as yours, is just to protect the watershed. I mean, that's our mission statement. So we're serious about it. We're involved. But I mean, I'm hearing you talk about all this, and I mean, lots of people that apply for all this stuff have to show different elevations and plans, and they talk about berming, and we're informally talking about berming on a plan that has Sharpies and highlighters about what's going to be done. So how can that be held accountable? And furthermore, the job that was done before was done when the Wetlands Protection Act was enforced, and what was happening, it was done by a contractor because the contractor would have had to have machines to do this. It was done willingly. So, I mean, to call it an illegal installation is not absurd, because it definitely was. And as I said, our objective is to go from here forward, and we can't do much about what was gone in the past, and we are definitely open to try to do something about this, depending on how we can coordinate things.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I appreciate the work that has been done to improve stormwater. When we did the site visit with LWA, and we got to walk up and down the road and hear about how the efforts that have been made to make some changes in stormwater runoff. You know, it was good to see those efforts being made. And I agree, the photographs from a few years ago may not be the best evidence of the current conditions. And we have to take that under consideration, because things have changed since then. As I mentioned earlier, we have made a determination that the drain pipe was done without a permit, and as part of an enforcement investigation. And our solution was to require this applicant to submit a notice of intent. So we've already made that determination, and now we're looking to authorize the work to remove this unpermitted drain. So I just want to be clear that we're not arguing about whether or not that drain had a permit or not. We've made the determination that there is no evidence that it did. If it did, it was permitted, it's certainly, there's no record in the Conservation Commission or the Board of Health's files. And we certainly looked hard to try to figure that out, even going through all the minutes, and did not find anything. So we are where we are. And so my concern right now, because it is getting late and I think we need to figure out where we're going, is that the questions I have are about drainage and the driveway grading, and also a planting plan for it down by the lake. Because I think I might be looking for a condition for a vegetative buffer strip, as we have required with other applicants in similar situations where we had concerns about wanting to protect the bank and the resource area in a sensitive spot. So Janice, go ahead.
So I think along that line, I understand Bob's point of view, and he doesn't have there's no legal easement for drainage across his property, and it could seriously impact his septic system. But on the other hand, listening to the comments from people, that is a big outstanding question. Where is that water going to go instead? And I wonder, I think with one of the other projects that you had along the lake, you asked the homeowner to get some help, advice, or whatever from an engineer to see if their plan needed a little improvement for the rain garden or whatever it was that they were putting in. And I wonder if Bob could possibly get some, I don't know how this works, whether you can get have an engineer or a hydrogeologist look at the plan and just say, well, you're going to you'd have to make the berm, 1 foot high, if you want this to hold, or, the velocity, the water's coming from both directions and something's going to have to be done, before this will work or something, just because it could seriously impact his own a property and his septic system if everything blows out. So, I mean, that's my concern, is just for everybody's sake to have some kind of a professional opinion, maybe not a total plan, but at least some feedback, a review by someone to see whether this looks doable or whether there are questions that still need to be answered or fixed. I don't know.
And, my thought about it, I mean, I think it makes sense to some extent. I think, it's, for me, the question is really around the driveway and the grading, or, what gets done with the driveway. That's kind of the remaining question. I feel pretty clear in my own mind about the drain. I don't think the drain should remain in place. I think it needs to be removed. Is kind of the direction I'm leaning in. I don't see another way to protect the resource area. I understand that it creates problems for the road, and this is where I feel like as a commission, we're in a tough position because we can't fix all the problems, nor can we respond to all the different competing interests here. And I recognize that it is really complicated, but our jurisdiction is protecting the resource area. And this is a point source discharge that is contaminating the lake. And I have consulted with DEP several times about this because, this is a serious situation and I want to make sure we're doing our due diligence. And the feedback I received kind of confirmed kind of what we've been saying, which is this pipe is problematic because it is, there is no treatment for it. There's no pre-treatment for it. There's no post-treatment, and it's just piping sediments into the lake. And there's no space that Bob has available for any kind of pre-treatment because he doesn't have enough real estate between the road and his septic system. So he doesn't have it within his capacity to create a pre-treatment bay, for example, sediment bay or something. He just doesn't have the land for it. So we don't have the authority to order somebody else to create a sediment bay, pre-treatment bay on somebody else's property. We can't do that. That's outside of our jurisdiction, especially because it would be over 120 feet from the lake. So it's even out of the buffer zone. But I don't think we have that jurisdiction to do that.
Okay.
So it's a problem, but it may be that it's an imperfect, we may have to come up with an imperfect solution that's the best that we can do within the lanes of our jurisdiction and what we are tasked to do.
To stop the contamination of the lake water.
Stop the contamination of the lake that may require other actions by other parties. If it continues to be a problem, perhaps it won't. Maybe the improvements that have been done on the road will be sufficient and there won't be any kind of catastrophic flooding. What we would hope for that. But the question about whether the driveways should be bermed, I guess I'm feeling like I don't have enough information to make a decision about that. What do you think, Scott and Mary?
I may look at this maybe maybe I'm looking at the same way as you, Marion, but to me, the question about the drainage here and the authorities of the commission, it's clear to me that while we do have the authority to prevent the point source discharge into the lake, that's clear. That falls squarely within the authority of the commission. A lot of the discussions around the berming and where the water is to go really is outside of the authority of the commission in terms of, I know I heard comments about whether or not the commission is in fact granting an easement or not granting an easement for flowage one way or the other. And that simply is not, from my perspective, it's very clear that we're not granting flowage easements one way or the other. Our authorities are to safeguard the lake and to, in this case, to close off the point source discharge. So I do think there's a more complicated question at hand here in terms of where the water should go and what the larger solution might be outside of Mr. Douglas's property and including it. But again, in my mind, it's clearly falls outside the jurisdiction of the Conservation Commission. And, from that standpoint, I don't have any questions about the berming or removing the pipe as laid out. It seems that the berming wouldn't fall within our authority. It's not causing any drainage.
We have issued conditions where we've told applicants they can't berm.
Well, I guess I don't know under what authority, unless it's causing drainage. I could see if berming or redirecting of water is causing impact to a protected wetland area. That would make sense to me, Marianne, but if I don't know the situation that you're describing and whether or not it applies to this one. I'm just looking at this one and I don't see how the berming would result in a negative impact to a protected wetland under our authority, but
there are no other resource areas. There's no BVWs, there's no other resource area in that vicinity that I'm aware of.
Right, so I don't know how the berming would affect it. In my mind, it doesn't. And so if it does, then I guess I'd be open to having that conversation with the commission, but I don't see it right off the bat. Regarding the planting piece, I do think if they're given time, there could be a natural sheet flow that would come this way, and safeguarding that area to make sure there's not erosion and planting it in such a way to protect the lake makes sense to me. And I heard you say that, Miriam, that that was something that you were interested in getting more information on the planting. And so that makes sense to me, but that's where I sit.
We could also, we've done this before with other applications, is say as a condition, they have to come back with a planting plan for our approval before they begin work. So we could issue an order of conditions with that, requiring him to come back with a planting plan that we would approve, so that, you know, it's another way to do it. We did that last week, I think. What are your thoughts, Mary?
So I'm kind of, I have some of the same thoughts as Scott. I think my question really goes back to, so if we do all the things, there's still going to be some water that's going to come onto Bob's property. And I guess that goes with the planting, but that's really the question I still have in my mind, is that however, you're still going to get some flow. How are you looking to deal with whatever that you do get? Whether it's overflow, you're going to get some more drainage. I'd like to see or hear an idea of how any other water that comes on is going to be taken care of. Did that make sense? I know it's getting late. Am I talking in circles?
Do you want to respond, Bob? You're muted.
I beg your pardon. I didn't know that was a question headed toward me, and I apologize. Yeah, so as far as the planning plan, Mary, I would imagine that you know, the edges of my property, especially the one on the right that's been, you know, and you all saw it, has been scoured. I could imagine replacing that with laurels or other plants, ground cover, et cetera, which would be a natural buffer. Also on the you know, the left side as you look toward the lake, I could put in I've had blueberry bushes in there before. Those are great for wildlife. They look pretty. I could imagine lining that side with native Vaccinium corymbosum. So it's I think those would be things that I put forward on the table.
So what we've done in the past, Bob, is ask applicants to come give us a plan, give us a site plan with it drawn out, what plants, where you're going to put them, so we can see it all in context, including the area down by the lake. And what I would like to see is an indigenous plant buffer strip there, whether it's shrubs or herbaceous plants or whatever it is you want to put there. I'd like to see an area that's planted and maintained as a vegetative strip.
Yep, I could certainly provide that. I imagine strips on both sides. And again, I like berry-bearing plants for wildlife. And I'd probably go heavy on those, maybe Ilex winterberry or something on those lines.
So I'm hearing from Scott and Mary that you guys are okay with approving his driveway plan as presented. Generally, I know that we're deliberating here and we're still in an open public meeting, but we have to decide whether we need to continue or not. So we need to figure out whether we have enough to close.
I'm fine continuing for the planting plan that you've requested, Miriam. I don't have any questions around the berming aspect of it, but the site plan for planting, I'm fine with that. We
could also close and just have him present a plan for us to approve at a later date. We can make that a condition. We did that with I don't remember which one. Was it 56 North Laurel Drive that we did that? One of our recent NOIs, we did that. Mary, what do you think?
So I don't know. I'd like him to come back. I'd like to come back with the plans to look at it. A planting plan before we close this out.
Okay.
I think it would also be helpful to have the other two commissioners be able to look at that too and provide some input.
Great.
Not just decide here to close
it. I think that makes sense. Are you willing to continue, Bob, to the next meeting?
Sure, yeah, and I apologize. I could certainly have that information to you by the time of the next meeting, but I would not, I'm afraid that Thursday I'm not able to attend. I have an appointment that I made long ago, and I won't be able to attend that Thursday
Oh.
night.
Well, our next meeting after that, let me just check my calendar. So we're meeting on the 8th and then we'll be meeting on the 22nd. Could we do this 22nd?
That should be fine for me.
Okay, let's do 7 PM.
So do you need a motion to continue this till
We
the,
do.
till the
Let me just-
27th? Is
that fine, Bob?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, yes, we need a motion to continue the public hearing to September 22nd, 7 PM.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, second,
Second.
okay, David,
Aye.
Con.
Aye.
Okay, all right, long night. Thank you for
Thank you all
everybody's.
for your time. I really appreciate it.
But thank you, Bob.
Appreciate all the
Thank you there
input
for
in the information.
We do appreciate it. So just, we're gonna, site visit scheduling, we need to do a site visit for 70 Lake Drive. This is Mark, Rivers property, doing some work on the bank, and he is scheduled for a public hearing on the 8th. And then, did everybody see the email about the Wheelock Tract Solar Project? And that the planning board was arranging a site visit in September. There were a couple of dates. I think it was either the 7th or the 9th. So what I want to know is who would be interested in going, and do you have a preference of either day or time?
Yeah, I wouldn't be going.
Okay. How about you, Scott? No, okay.
No, I can't make it. I'm
I'll check.
sorry.
Okay. All right, so the 3 site visits that we have to schedule are 70 Lake Drive and the Wheelock Tract and lot 032. And I would prefer to not do those this weekend. And I'm just looking at the schedule if we're going to run into the holidays. When is Labor Day? Is that the 5th?
Yeah, I think that's it. I lost my calendar now, so.
Yeah, I can't do a site visit on the 4th. I could do one on Saturday. So if that's a possibility, maybe we could try to do a site visit on Saturday if that works.
I could probably do Saturday.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll shoot for the Saturday, the 3rd. I'll send an email about that. Okay. All right. I don't think we have anything else for tonight unless, Carrie, have I missed anything?
Yeah, so there's a few things for the follow-up / updates that I don't know. There's a few times I ran to the bathroom, so I could have possibly missed it, but there was the dam NOI extension and the MOU.
Yeah, the dam MOI, I sent Mark, the paperwork, the application information for how to apply for a dam, the NOI extension. And I have not signed the MOU because I thought would double check to make sure you didn't have a signed copy anywhere. Because remember, Penny said she thought there was a signed copy.
And then also there's the resident complaint about level of
Yeah,
lake.
I think we actually talked about that at the last meeting. I don't think there's any update about that. And the Pearson land acquisition, I don't think we have an update on that.
Okay.
I know about.
And I was also wondering if whoever is iPhone with the long number could identify themselves if possible, please, for the minutes.
Okay, all right, well. All right, let's adjourn and I'll be in touch about those site visits. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
There wasn't a motion to adjourn, was there? We just skipped
I
all
so
together, I guess. Okay.
we'll let the rest vote in absentia.
Okay, sounds good.
See you, Carrie.
Bye.